Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Welcome, 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 welcome. It should be a fun conversation. Got a couple things on my mind for the opening remarks. Always happy to answer your super chat questions. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. It's going to be fun. Away we go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
All right, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you. The way this works is I generally give my opening remarks. My opening remarks are then followed by the roll call, where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations, names and locations. And then after that, I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. And it looks like we've already got a super chat from Jason Hunt, waking up to U.S. imperialism without being woke. Well, there you go. That's an interesting... It's more of a prompt, but I need to say on that, thank you, Jason. And, it's your super chats that make the second half of the show happen. It really is. So keep them rolling in, because that's what makes the beauty of the super chats. The second half of the show is really all about your questions. And just a quick reminder of quick business that we always want to take care of. First things first, last night on the show, many of you were watching, we had a great super chat question about the hard hat riots of 1970. And I used that to actually make a point. I talked about something that happened in 2011 that I witnessed that was kind of the opposite of the hard hat riots. And that's the kind of good moment that we have here. But if I just live stream, it gets lost. So if you want to watch good moments that we have on these streams, go and subscribe to Caleb Maupin videos. And I'm going to try to post as many video clips, to cut and post as many video clips on Caleb Maupin videos as I can. So, if you want to post clips on your channel, I might find them and rip them and put them on there. But I can only post so many videos on this channel because it'll mess up my notifications. Then you all won't know that I'm streaming and it'll mess everything up. So I can only post so many video clips on this channel if I'm going to keep streaming. So I'm posting video clips on this other channel. And that's what we're doing. So go and subscribe to Caleb Maupin videos, the other channel where we're going to be posting highlights. I gave a talk about 3 forms of socialism, 3 socialist movements. I put that up on there. My hopes for the Korean Peninsula. What is Enver Hoxha? I'm just cutting segments from these streams where I'm answering somebody's question or explaining something. So just post it in there. Good stuff as always, folks. There's that. Also, just to let you all know, we had a great patrons only stream on Monday. It was the first one we've had in a while. And we're going to do it again. We are up to 50 people on Patreon. 50 people are supporters of the work that we do here on Patreon. And we're going to have another patrons only stream on December 1st next week. It will be on December 1st next week that we have our next patrons only stream. So if you want to be part of that stream, if you want to be part of our Patreon community where I send you the books as they come out, and you get to be part of intimate patrons only streams, you get invited to meetups with me if I'm in your area, by all means, go and sign up on Patreon and support the work that we do on Patreon. We'd really appreciate it if you did that. Also, the Center for Political Innovation, we are back in business. We have a date. We're going to have a live event in the next few months. It's very exciting. I love it when I have a date. I love it when I have a date to count down to. So if you would like to join the Center for Political Innovation, we're up to between 50 and 60. We're up to we're up to between 50 and 60 members currently. We're rebuilding the membership, and it's moving right along. We got an exciting event coming up. So if you would like to join the Center for Political Innovation, by all means, you can sign up on that link. Just getting all the business taken care of here, right? Point by point by point. That's how you got to do things. And there we go. Got another super chat. Is there potential for a second American Civil War by the end of the decade? Very good question. Very, very, very good. And so I just wanted to get that out of the way. We're having CPI meetings every week. We got one coming up this weekend. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving, but I'll be streaming on Thanksgiving. I'm streaming every day here. So if you're hanging out after having a nice Thanksgiving dinner or whatever, we'll definitely be streaming on Thanksgiving, and we'll be streaming hopefully on Black Friday, the big shopping day. I won't be out shopping. I'll be avoiding Manhattan like the plague. I don't want to be part of the stampedes or anything like that. Thank you, Viking Dave, for your super chat. And we will definitely be streaming, and we're going to keep going, right? We are rising. This channel is rising, and that's great. So like I said, people do get unsubscribed randomly by YouTube, randomly by the algorithm. So to make sure that doesn't happen to you, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the notifications bell. People don't get the notifications, etc. So welcome, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you. The way this works, just a quick reminder, I give opening remarks. After I give my opening remarks, we then have the roll call where I call you out as I see you, names and locations, and then I answer super chats. So I've already written down super chats, and we'll get going. For my opening remarks, I first want to update you all on a few things, just a few ongoing things. The first thing I want to update you all on is what I'm going to start calling the saga of Garland Nixon. Garland Nixon is one of our dear friends, right? He spoke at the Center for Political Innovation conference in Chicago. I regularly go on his radio show along with Dr. Wilmer Leon on Sputnik Radio. He has a show called The Critical Hour, which is a great radio program full of great analysis. It's really a great show. And now Garland Nixon, as I told you last night, he's been banned from Twitter. He's been permanently suspended from Twitter, which why do they call it suspended if it's permanent? I mean, he's banned from Twitter. And the reason he's banned is because he made a joke. He made a joke at the expense of Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State. It was, he joked about him strangling Palestinians with his bare hands, trying to provoke war, etc. And that was what they cited as the reason for permanently banning him. Permanently banning him from Twitter. And so he's a well-connected guy. And he went on RT to talk about getting banned for this, unfair BS reason. He went on Telesur from Venezuela to talk about being banned for this unfair reason. He went on Jimmy Dore to talk with my friend and ally and fellow anti-imperialist, the great Jimmy Dore, about being banned unfairly and how much nonsense it was. And it was like, you could call it the suspension heard from around the world. It seems to have created an impact, so much so that we now have Elon Musk tweeting out about a blanket amnesty. Hear this? A blanket amnesty for everyone who's been suspended from Twitter who didn't violate the law. And he's got a poll up, and it looks like, Garland Nixon, he wasn't suspended before and restored like Trump. He was just suspended now, and he raised a ruckus about it. And folks online, we all raised a ruckus about it. I was tweeting about it. My tweet about it was shared by George Galloway. He tweeted about it. Jimmy Dore was up in arms. Everyone was fired up at how ridiculous it was for them to ban Garland Nixon just for criticizing and making a joke at the expense of Antony Blinken. And now it looks like it's starting to have an impact. Wow. Wow. This is pretty exciting. Pretty exciting. All right. Harold Horn. Leffy Asante. And Glenn Ford. Wrote it down. And this is big. This is big. And it's awesome. It's tremendous. And I hope Garland Nixon is restored. We hopefully we will have the video of his interviews here soon, and we're going to show it on the channel, because it's really great to see someone who's part of our circles fighting the power, standing up. And I'm really excited to see Garland Nixon creating a ruckus and not letting the Silicon Valley fascists shut him down. So I just wanted to update you all on that situation. On Monday, I went on Garland Nixon's radio program on KPFK. He's not just on Sputnik, he's on KPFK Los Angeles. We had a great show talking about socialism. Those phone lines were lighting up. There were so many people who called in and wanted us to engage with them. I'm getting the audio. We're going to have the audio of that conversation on YouTube here. Class Analysis has it right. Garland can't be silenced. And, because he's well connected to the anti-imperialist camp, because he has allies, he's friendly now with the All-African People, or the African People's Socialist Party. He's friendly with the Center for Political Innovation. He's friendly with Tara Reid. He's friendly with George Galloway. He's friendly with Jimmy Dore. And when we come together, right, when those of us who are anti-imperialists come together, great things happen. Right. This is the importance of these kinds of relationships. Right. And not just getting mad over every little thing we disagree with and making a ruckus over it. Right. This is the beauty of these kind of relationships. And thank you, Steve, for your super chat. Was Clinton's attempt at easing relations with North Korea and Vietnam success genuine, or something you agree with? Was Clinton's success easing relations with Vietnam and North Korea success something you agree with? That's a good question. All right. Very, very good. Wokeness rooted in secular civil religion. And secular civil religion. That's a good question as well. Right. So, yeah, we got a lot. This is already going to be a great second half. Keep those super chats rolling in. Garland Nixon is great. And it shows that when we maintain a block, when we don't engage in wrecking, when we maintain a block, we can get stuff done. There's a beautiful statement that was made by a friend of mine. That was written against wrecking. And this website, againstwrecking.com, was created by people who've watched what's gone on in anti-imperialist circles over the past couple years. And they've decided that we need to just take a position against wrecking. And they published this beautiful statement against wrecking. And I'm just going to read it out loud. It's a very carefully written statement that a friend of mine wrote. And I'm going to read it out loud, and they're asking for people to sign it. Againstwrecking.com. Statement against wrecking. They wrote, quote, "If the struggle against imperialism is our common cause, we should not be surprised when attacks on our organizations and personal character arise. The history of radical anti-war and civil rights causes proved the lengths that counter-revolutionary imperial corps will go to eradicate any coherent dissent. COINTELPRO was effective in creating rifts and suspicion that led to the psychological death of the struggle by way of casting doubt and the actual death of many political leaders. The initial salacious accounts can become indelibly true. Lies can be cemented into the historical narrative. The activist in the mire of never really knowing is a recipe for nihilism, factionalism, and surrender. If we accept this version of history, then we really do not know our enemy, and we are not prepared to be leaders in the manner that this historical moment demands. It is the responsibility of every anti-imperialist to foreground unity with full knowledge of counter-revolutionary tactics and steel our commitment and resolve. It is time to get over the fear of association that finds expression in taking the most diluted and non-committal stance in the moment of crisis. Cohesion around this singular cause means devaluing the purity of one's personal profile by abstaining from moralism and impulsive commentary. Learning from the history of wrecking and counterintelligence means denying these instincts of self-preservation and self-advancement in favor of clarity of purpose and perseverance. For there is no synergy among the self. Together, we must steady the ship by advancing unity and vision, knowing the muddy waters, the torrent, the storms is not passing an event, but a continual attack. This is the way that we will win. Great statement. And there's a contribution form that was been put out. I think this is the beginning of a great effort, this statement that was written against wrecking. So if you can help circulate this, we need to get people to understand that the internet is rigged to get us to fight with each other. It is rigged to amplify every disagreement. Should couples share the same political beliefs? That's a fair question. A fair question as well. And this against wrecking statement, tremendous statement. So, I think it's the beginning of a great effort that is intended to be, many different people involved, etc. So I am really happy about this against wrecking statement. And, what we're seeing with Garland Nixon is the positive example, right? This is what can happen when people put aside whatever personal differences and they come for one of us anti-imperialists. They came for Garland Nixon, and I stood up for him, and George Galloway stood up for him, and Revolutionary Blackout Network stood up for him, and Telesur stood up with him, and RT stood up with him, and news agencies around the world stood up for him, and all kinds of people. They said, you know what? They came for one of us. We ain't going to take it. We're not going to tolerate it. And it's creating a ruckus. So much so it looks like Elon Musk had to respond. Can you believe this? Our community was involved in something that Elon Musk is now responding to. That's big. And this is called solidarity. And it's when you put the interests of the movement and of anti-imperialism first over your personal griping, your personal opinion. Think good things can happen, but it means that people have to be willing to not just sit on the internet and not fall for the manipulation, because social media is rigged to make us fight each other. It's completely rigged to make us fight each other. That's what it is. It's completely rigged to incite us against each other, to touch all of our phobias, to incite all of our personal traumatic stress disorder, all of the things that trigger us and just make us afraid of each other, just make us afraid to stand up for truth. That's what they're doing, right? They know how to play psychological games. These are psychological operations. Read about the history of MK Ultra. They know how to push people's buttons, and their goal is they don't want us to be active. Right? They want us all to just be left book losers. They want us all to just be people who sit on the internet talking shit and attacking other people. And that's what they want. They don't want us to build actual organizations. They don't want us to come together and get actual shit done. They don't want us to have great, amazing conferences. They don't want bonds, real bonds to be created between people. No, they just want everyone to be pessimistic and hopeless and lonely, and that's what they want. And it is our responsibility to make sure we don't give into it, right? Yeah, I mean, and Jared is pointing out that it seems like the LaRouche people led to the Progressive Caucus letter, right, by disrupting the town halls and all of that. And then they revealed that the Progressive Caucus is completely bought and sold, because what happened? The Progressive Caucus had to retract their letter, right? That we can have an impact. We can have an impact. Don't fall into the dual delusion that a lot of internet Marxists, internet communists, internet anti-imperialists fall into. Right? And this is worth pointing out. There is that dual delusion that people fall into. And I've talked about this a lot lately, but I'll finish up this point by reflecting on it. I see this all the time. All the time I see this. It is the dual delusion. The entire PSL, this is what they think, right? The entire, half of internet communists, maybe more than half, fall into this dual delusion. On the one hand, they think that they are the vanguard and that their specific, pure interpretation of communism is 100% correct. Things have to be, if they understand it all completely, they are the vanguard. They will be leading the revolution someday. They will be storming the Winter Palace. They are infallible. They are, they are the 21st century Lenin. They have delusions of grandeur on the one hand, right? They don't recognize that no communist organization in the United States is leading anything. That what calls itself leftism and socialism is more pro-imperialist than average Americans are. That there is a big problem. There is an anti-imperialist and global revolutionary movement around the world, but there is not at this point a U.S. incarnation of it, other than the Center for Political Innovation, other than some other groups that kind of get it. But there's very little in the United States that's attached to the global movement, and we don't have a base among the population. And that you ain't Lenin, you ain't the vanguard, you ain't the Bolsheviks, you don't have the pure specific ideology that will lead the revolution. You don't know everything. So they have this delusion of grandeur on the one hand. And then on the other hand, they have this delusion of complete powerlessness. They have this belief that nothing we can do can change anything. Nothing we can do can have an impact. It's all beyond our means. It's all beyond our reach. All we can do is just sit on the internet and complain and be hopeless and be mad at other people that do more stuff than us. And yeah, well, they did that. Well, they're stupid. And it's bizarre. It is this double think, right? And people if you want to actually get things done in the real world, which is what I aspire to do. I am not out here to be the biggest streamer on YouTube, the biggest Twitch. I like having YouTube subscribers. I like having numbers, but I'm not out here to be the biggest. I am out here to build a real community of solidarity and actually get things done. And if you fall into the dual delusion that a lot of these people fall into, you can't do that. Because if you're the vanguard, if you have the 100% pure interpretation, if you are the Lenin, why, you can't humble yourself. You can't negotiate with people. You can't compromise. You can't get anything done, right? Because you are the one. You're the one true leader. You are the great one, number one. And if you can't do anything, there's no point. Why should you do anything? You can just sit in your house all day long. You can just tear down other people that are actually trying to do things and feel good about yourself, because there's no point. Right? There's nothing we can do. It's hopeless. There's no point. And so we can just sit around tearing other people down and trying to make ourselves feel better and laughing about the fact that everything's falling apart. You can do that too. This is a dual delusion, because the reality is we can actually get shit done. The LaRouche people got shit done. They went to the town halls of AOC. They went to town halls. They disrupted the AOC people. They disrupted the progressives. So they kind of scrambled and tried to make it look like they were kind of maybe for de-escalating with Russia. And then Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party forced them to back down on it. And they revealed, we have smoking gun proof that the Democratic Party will not allow an anti-war position. The LaRouche people did that. They got some shit done. You can get shit done. And now we see Garland Nixon is getting shit done, right? Because they banned him from Twitter for bullshit reasons. He raised holy hell, and he had a relationship with people, right? I'm sure there's things George Galloway has said that Garland Nixon doesn't agree with. But did Garland Nixon go, fuck you, George, you're a phone? No, he He let it go and he held on to his relationship. There are things that I say that I am sure Garland Nixon doesn't agree with. But did he say, fuck you, Caleb? I don't. No, he said he and I have maintained a relationship, a comradely relationship. There are things that Tara Reid has said that Garland probably doesn't agree with. There are things that Revolutionary Blackout Network has said. There's things that the All-African People's Socialist Party has said that he doesn't agree with. But because he was able to maintain a comradely relationship, when they came for him, people who put anti-imperialism above it all saw that they were going after an anti-imperialist for bullshit reasons. And they raised holy hell, and RT raised hell, and Venezuela and Telesur raised hell, and I raised hell, and George Galloway raised hell, and Revolutionary Blackout Network raised hell, and Jimmy Dore raised hell. And it looks like now Elon Musk is on the defensive. You can actually make a difference. And what's kind of scary is we are way more powerful than we think we are. We ain't the vanguard. We're not the Bolsheviks. We're not going to seize power, right? We're not going to become the new ruling party anytime soon. But the amount of impact that a very small group of people who are committed to actually getting shit done can have is quite astronomical. Did you really think that just all of us raising hell about Garland Nixon was going to force a billionaire, the world's richest man, Elon Musk, to go, okay. Did you think that that's possible? Well, it is. Did you think that it's possible that a few LaRouche followers and their allies going and disrupting and just shouting at AOC would force them into a situation? But it did. It happened, right? You can have an impact. And you got to break out of the dual delusion if you want to have an impact. You got to sit there and you got to be able to say, look, this is what I can do. And this is realistic. And I want to carry out this goal. And you have to learn to walk before you run. You have to set achievable goals first and accomplish them and then expound on them. You can't expect Rome to be built in a day. You can't expect to have, the stars and the moon immediately. You have to build achievable goals and think, I can do something, and do it, and then learn from it. And if things go badly, you have to say, okay, well, this didn't go well because of this. And you have to be able to not just be crushed by your setbacks. That's a really common thing I see. People go out and do something and it doesn't work out the way they wanted to. And they go, oh, I never want to do anything again. No, you have to go, okay, we did it. There were some successes, but this didn't go well. So we're going to adjust and we're going to do it better. And then we're going to adjust and we're going to do it better. And then we're going to adjust and we're going to do it better. I can just talk about the CPI conferences that we had, for example, right? I've been doing this for years. I rented a classroom. We used to have classes. If you go watch my talk I gave called Mao and American Socialists, one of the better, more informational historical talks that I've given. I'll pull it up. I'll link it. It's, I wish more people knew about it, but it's got a lot of views. Mao and American Socialists, right? This is a class I gave. And I gave it, at, where did I give it? I gave it at the driving school, on like 43rd Street. There's this driving school. It doesn't exist anymore. It exists, but they don't let you rent it anymore. Things have changed since the pandemic. But, I rented this driving school. It was like $60 for 3 hours. It was very cheap. And I would rent this driving school, and I wanted to give a talk about Mao. So for $60, I rented this driving school. I made a Facebook event. I had a friend of mine that had an old cheap video camera, and, I gave a class, and then I edited the video and I posted 10,000 views, Mao and American Socialists. It was given, the class was given, I think the date is on here somewhere. The class was given, I forget, the date, but it was given in 2019, right before the pandemic. It was a class that I gave, and it was a good class, but I learned from it. The audience was really engaged and liked it, and the Q&A went well, and I learned from it, right? The first CPI conference that we did in Austin, it all worked out. It went smoothly, but there were some bumps along the way. I don't even want to get into specifics about the bumps. I don't want to embarrass anybody. There were some bumps along the way, But we worked it out, you know. The first retreat we did, where I gave the Saxton lectures, very successful retreat, but there were some bumps along the way. We worked it out. The next retreat that we had went way more smoothly, right? And then the conference we had in Chicago, people were blown away by it, you know, about the power, the chanting, the speeches, the African People's Socialist Party being there and firing it up, and Tara Reid giving her an award, and Garland Nixon, and the speeches and the power. It was really something special. Well, it's because we did it a couple times before and we learned. You learn by doing. This is what Mao meant when he said, in order to know what a pear tastes like, you have to bite into it. Knowledge comes from correct, practical experience. And so the first time I rented a classroom and gave a talk about socialism, it was bumpy. And the camera quality, I didn't have a professional photographer. It was just a friend who happened to video things. Nice guy, but he doesn't have the most high quality camera. That's fine. There was awkward moments, but we got better. And the more you do it, it used to be when Students in Youth for a New America started out, it was like 10 people who were like my friends in New York City that were vaguely interested in communism. I would rent a classroom. I'd give a talk. And then we'd all go out to the diner and chat afterwards, and I was always pushing these people to do more. And these people didn't want to do more, right? I mean, there was one guy, I was pushing him to do a class on Bothism, and he kind of wanted to do it, and I arranged for there to be a good photographer there and all, but he's a loser. He doesn't want to do anything, right? There was somebody else I was pushing to do stuff, and he, and that, but I was always saying, let's adjust how we can make this real, right? How can we get this beyond just being a small group of friends who listen to Caleb give classes about socialism? How can we get this to be something real? And we're doing it now. I mean, what we did this summer, the conference in Austin, the retreat in Kansas, the conference that we had in Chicago, we're doing real shit now. We're getting real shit done, right? I've got a great, idea, proposal, some allies. I'm working on something around the Korean Peninsula. That's really exciting. And it's like, but again, it was a process of tweaking, of coming back to the drawing board and saying, this is what I'm capable of doing. Not this is what I'd like to do. This is what I'm capable of actually doing. Taking the idea from your mind, going and doing it, right? Learning from the process of doing it, and then coming back and doing it better. And then coming back and doing it better, and constantly perfecting and learning. This is the process. This is what a revolutionary does. They don't sit on the sidelines and declare they're the new Lenin. And they don't sit on the sidelines and declare, oh, there's nothing I can do. They learn, and they make mistakes, and they take risks, and they perfect the method. And they're constantly measuring the work that they do for its impact, for its success. And then based on that, they go back to the drawing board. They learn from their mistakes and they do it better, right? This is how a serious revolutionary and a serious person, I mean, this applies to everything, not just revolutionary politics. This is in life. I mean, if you want to exercise, you don't just sit around saying, well, I'm an Olympic athlete, and you just don't sit around going, oh, I'm out of shape. You start exercising. And you get better at it, and you get better at it, and you get better at it. And then, you're more and more in shape. That's just kind of how things work. There's a process of visualizing things, doing them, learning from your mistakes, coming back, visualizing them again, perfecting your vision, going and doing them. This is how life works. And if you want to really get things done, this is what you must learn to do. And I really urge people, I've ranted about this a lot, but this is what we're doing with CPI. Right? This is what the Center for Political Innovation is doing, right? We are going out and doing things. And it is amazing to me what we've been able to do in the short amount of time with the very little resources we have. We were election observers in Nicaragua. We put on a huge conference that got a huge amount of national attention. It was like a fact check, like social media had to fact check it, and it was shown on TV all over Russia and all of this. And then we put on another conference that Newsweek had to comment on because, oh my God, there's Americans that support Russia. This can't be. And it's amazing what we've accomplished. And we're going to keep accomplishing it, right? And we're going to keep accomplishing it. And part of strengthening an organization, and this is interesting. I've got many other things I want to talk about. I guess these opening remarks tonight are going to be longer than I thought they were going to be because I've got more to say. but part of a party strengthening itself, part of an organization strengthening itself. CPI is not a party by any means. I mean, we are just a group of people that are promoting the brand of socialism that exists around the world. We've broken with synthetic leftism. We are cutting new ground, and we are promoting the city building tendency and city building socialism. It's an educational organization that is laying the ideological foundations for eventually something that might call itself a party emerging. But part of strengthening a revolutionary organization is splitting, right? And that's what Vladimir Lenin, he says this, right? If you read his writings, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, you read What Is to Be Done, he makes this abundantly clear. Left-wing communism and infantile disorder. That part of the struggle is splitting. Now, obviously, you want to unite as many people as possible. You want to expand the organization. But there will be some people who join the organization who don't belong there. And it will be the process of struggle and the process of really doing things that will force these people to reveal themselves. When you're just sitting around talking about shit, oh, I'd like to do this. Oh, I'd like to do that. Oh, that's all well and good. That's all well and good. However, actually getting shit done, actually building an organization puts people into real life situations where they are tested. And there are some people who seem good in the abstract. They seem like they understand the ideas, but they just aren't capable of actually putting it into practice. And those people reveal themselves and they get the hell out of there, right? And this is important as well. So I just wanted to reflect on that a little bit. That's my reflection, and that's kind of where my mind took me after the whole Garland Nixon thing. Long live Garland Nixon. I am with Garland Nixon. Awesome guy, and I'm really proud of our movement for coming together and making this an issue. I am proud of our movement for doing that. Long live Garland Nixon. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about, another news item I just wanted to reflect on. The Walmart shooting. I don't know if you heard about this, but there was a Walmart shooting. An individual who worked at a Walmart showed up at his workplace and shot a bunch of people. Horrendous incident. Horrible. I mean, but there's an aspect of this that mainstream media is not really touching on, which is that, the life of a retail worker, the life of a low-wage employee is not a good one. And that, everyone, when these shootings happen, the left says access to firearms and the right says mental health. Well, let's talk about mental health at risk of being called right-wingers. Let's talk about mental health, because I've applied to work at Walmart before. When I was in college, I applied for a number of jobs, and I applied to work at Walmart. And I thought I would just go in and fill out a job application. Oh, no. They make you take a big, long psychological test to work at Walmart. And I didn't pass. They didn't call me back. Maybe they just didn't have any openings. But, I mean, it was this big, if I remember correctly, it was like this folder, this like binder with all these multiple choice questions that were very strange, and I carefully had to fill out those questions in order to work there. A lot of the jobs I applied for back in those days made me do that. And, I applied to work as like a barista. And I remember they had me, fill out, like, the questions were weird. Like, when people give me instructions, are they A, smarter than me, B, just as smart as me, or C, not as smart as me, or D, I don't know. And I was just like, wait, what? All right. There is this weird psychological screening that goes into working at Walmart. And that's because of the fact that Walmart has invested a huge amount of money into what they call industrial psychology. Industrial psychology, which is the science of capitalists exploiting their workers and getting the most out of their workers as they can by using scientific, tested psychological methods. I'm not exaggerating. Google industrial psychology. It is a thing. And, there's a reason that Sam Walton won the Presidential Medal of Freedom he was given an award by George Herbert Walker Bush, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Why? Because he was the Henry Ford of the service sector. Henry Ford, the brutal capitalist of Ford Motor Company, with his speed ups and his assembly line, he developed all kinds of methods for perfecting assembly line production and mastering control over his workers on the assembly line. And he was a pioneer of exploiting workers on the factory floor. Well, Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, he was the Henry Ford of the retail sector. He pioneered the art of psychologically manipulating, learning every dirty trick to squeeze his employees as much as he possibly could. And there's all kinds of weird things that Walmart does. For example, one thing that I've heard about Walmart, fascinating to me, is that Walmart is notorious for making employees work off the clock, for making people, work off the clock, and when they're not getting paid. I mean, that's illegal. That is completely illegal. However, Walmart does that. And part of the way that they get away with it, from what, again, I've read, is that they let people steal, right? They let employees steal. They have a policy where managers are told to kind of look the other way when employees are stealing. And so the employee thinks, well, I don't want to rock the boat. I'm getting away with stealing a stereo or stealing a computer. I'm getting away with that. And so on top of that, I might as well, not say anything. Because if I say, something, I might rock the boat, and they might, realize that I'm stealing things. And it's a psychological trick. The amount of money they're getting out of these employees by making them work off the clock is far more than the amount that they steal. But in the mind of the employee, it's equal, right? And that this is the psychological manipulation that is used by Walmart. It's industrial psychology, right? And and that there are many things they do. There's a reason they have this psychological test for all the employees who work there. And so if you think about it, Walmart has kind of become a symbol of people being reduced to financial calculations, of the manipulation of people to make super profits. It has become a symbol of that, right? Walmart, they talk about how Walmart comes to a town and it lowers its prices as low as it can. It puts all the local businesses out of business, and then it raises the prices right back up. They talk about the Walmart scheme. I don't know what that is. I have no idea what that is, Jason. But it's a Walmart scheme. They talk about this. And so this employee at a Walmart, I don't know what happened, right? Was he terminated, or he was mad at his coworkers or something? But he went to work and he opened fire. Now, an important other aspect of this isn't directly related to Walmart, but we live in a society now that is oozing with pessimism. People think there's no hope. People think there's no purpose. And it's a conscious reality that social media is promoting suicide right now. I mean, social media is getting into people's minds, making them hopeless, making them think there is no future, and killing people. And I have said many times, Netflix, right? Netflix. I mean, whoever runs Netflix, there are some evil people that are running Netflix. Why? For this reason, right? I'll tell you this plain and simple. I work in the media. Did you know this? I work in the media. That's my job. And one thing that I'm well aware of is that you are not allowed to report on suicides. If you're in the local news, I was here in New York and somebody killed themselves, jumped off the Empire State Building or whatever, I can't do a story on that. You know why? Because it is documented that if you do a story in the news about Joe Bob jumped off the Empire State Building, there will be people who read that and think, oh, they killed themselves, so can I. And every time you report on a suicide, the suicide rate goes up. And so you can't do it. It's a danger to public health. It is against journalistic ethics to report on suicides. And little known fact, the suicide rate is higher than the homicide rate. Now, people don't believe that. It's one of those statistics that people hear and they say that can't be true. And the reason for that, the reason that people don't believe that is because media doesn't report suicides. People kill themselves more than they kill other people. However, when people kill other people, they put it on the news. When people kill themselves, they don't put it on the news. So as a journalist, it is against journalistic ethics. It's not illegal. I guess you can do it. It's technically legal. Okay. It's technically legal, but it is against journalistic ethics to report on suicides. So with that in mind, with the understanding that you cannot report Joe Bob jumped off the Empire State Building because that will kill people. People will see that and become more suicidal. And it will happen. I mean, if I did a story today that said Joe Bob jumped off a building, I would probably have 2 or 3 deaths on my hands because there would be 2 or 3 people who read in the newspaper about Joe Bob jumping off the building and said, oh shit, I can do it too. And so you can't do it, right? It's unethical as a journalist to report on suicide, right? So with that in mind, how the hell can Netflix do 13 Reasons Why? How? There is no ethical defense. There is no ethical defense of 13 Reasons Why. Edward Bernays was the uncle of Reed Hastings, Netflix CEO. There is no ethical defense of it. And a lot of people say, oh, but Caleb, you haven't watched the show. I refuse to watch the show. I don't want to think about it. And people are like, well, Caleb, just watch the show. If you can't report Joe Bob jumped off a building, how the hell can you do a TV program directed at children, at minors, at teenagers that is literally the dark fantasy of a suicidal person, right? She kills herself, but she makes videos first, and they all watch the videos and they realize what pain she was in, and it is the twisted, demented fantasy of a suicidal person. And there is no ethical defense of it. And the suicide attempt rate has increased as a result of it. That is, and it's documented. There are a number there have been teenagers who've killed themselves and their parents found the note and they admitted, afterwards, yeah, I got the idea from 13 Reasons Why. You can't do it. It's not ethical. There is no defense. Now, it's not illegal, right? We're not going to have a law. You can't do but it's not ethical. But Netflix is doing it. And they made a second season of it. I think they even made more seasons of it. It's not ethical. There is no defense of that. None. There is no defense of making a program that will kill people. But they do it because they're trying to kill us. They are trying to kill us. Silicon Valley is full of people who sit there and are thinking about, oh, there's too many people in the world and there's too many inferior people. We need to get them out of the gene pool. We need the superior ones to start breeding. And it is full of eugenicists and Malthusians, and it is full of sinister, evil people who think there are too many people in the world, who think that they are so smart because they work at Silicon Valley. They had the highest score at Harvard, and they've been on their computer their whole life. These antisocial, psychotic, sociopathic computer nerds who read Ayn Rand and think that they're Ubermenschen, that they're the great men. I'm the great man of the world, but no one's ever recognized how great I am. And there's a bunch of these sick, psychopath, antisocial computer nerds out there who are sitting there going, if only more of these useless eaters would kill themselves, then humanity would recognize my greatness. I'm the superior one, but no one knows it because I sit on my computer all day. Yes. It's the same kind of people that they accomplish nothing in their life, but they engage in cancel culture obsessively. They have no job. They got nothing going for them. They're just sitting at home. But it's like, somebody in another state who they've never met before is accused of being transphobic. So they're the guy who like calls up their boss. Did you know that your employee said a transphobic thing on Twitter once? And I'm going to put out that you hire transphobes. I'm going to destroy your business. And they're trying to get someone fired in another state because somebody they heard online that they said something. I mean, this is the same kind of like person who like their interaction with the world is through a computer screen. They have no emotions. They have no empathy, except empathy for themselves and this inner rage and hatred for themselves. And the way that they kind of shut down the voice in their head that says you're a failure, you screwed up, they shut it down by fantasizing that they're an Ubermensch. This is your typical this is your technocrat on Silicon Valley. That's what we're dealing with. Your Silicon Valley technocrat with an Ubermensch complex, with an Ayn Rand fetish, who sits there and is thinking, and they want people to kill themselves. They do. They want people to kill themselves. And so, computers and all of that, they're putting out pessimism. They're just pumping our society full of pessimism. But here's the thing, and this is the interesting thing, right? What makes 13 Reasons Why so vile, right? Well, the premise is the girl doesn't just kill herself. She kills herself in a way that gets her a lot of attention. She kills herself in a way that the world finally looks into what she had to say. The world finally hears her. That is what mass shooters do. Mass shooters are often people who would be suicidal. There are people that would be suicidal. However, it's not enough for them to kill themselves. Oh, no, not enough for them to kill themselves. They want to go down in a blaze of glory. They want to take all kinds of innocent people with them. They want their face on the news. They want everyone to look into how awful their life was and try to figure out why they did it and empathize with them. Mass shooters are suicidal people. They've been pumped full of the suicide porn and the hopelessness and the pessimism and all of that. And they're seething with hate for the world and inability to connect with other people and just contempt for humanity. But they've got a special brand of narcissism to accompany it, where it's not enough for them to just take themselves out. They expect to get killed by the police. They want their face on the news. They want a 13 Reasons Why scenario where everyone talks about why and how hard their life was for them. So you wonder why we're producing mass shootings. We have a culture that is encouraging depression, encouraging pessimism, encouraging suicide. And on top of that, we have a culture that encourages narcissism. Everyone's concerned about their image. Everyone's concerned about Facebook. Everyone's got their Twitter. Oh, what do people think of me? How many likes did I get? No one understands. So you set up a society where you're isolating people from each other. You're getting people hopeless and depressed and anti-human, breaking people's ability to connect with other people. You have them on a job where they're being psychologically profiled. So the Sam Walton family, one of the richest families in the world, can manipulate them more to squeeze more money out of them. Are we shocked that one of them, for lack of better terms, he goes postal? That he became so depressed and so suicidal, but he was also pumped up with this desire for vengeance and this desire for attention that he lost his mind and he shot up his workplace. Now, obviously, I'm not saying this man is justified. I'm not saying he should be released from prison or anything like that. He's obviously a murderer. He needs to go to prison. Make sure if he's still alive, it needs to make sure he never does this again. But this is the symptom of the psychological manipulation that our culture has, right? Where nobody feels validated, right? I mean, it sounds like this guy lost his job, right? Am I right? Did he get terminated? He lost his job. He felt like his life was over. He felt like he was destroyed. And so he felt like my life is over. But he's like, I am going to kill myself, is basically what he thought. But I want people to know about me. I want to be remembered. And so I want my 13 Reasons Why moment where people see me as the tragic anti-hero. He wanted to be the Joker, right? He wanted to be Macbeth, right? He wanted to be the tragic anti-hero, right? That's what he wanted to be. I mean, makes perfect sense. The way our society is set up, it makes perfect sense that people keep acting this way. Maybe we need to set up our society a different way. Maybe we need to change things. These are my reflections on the Walmart shooting. And I mean, it needs to be discussed. I think that this is a problem between the Joker and 13 Reasons Why and the pessimism being pumped out of our phones every day. And on top of that, why did he feel he needed validation via shootings? Right? This guy felt like he wasn't heard. He felt like people didn't feel his pain. He felt like there wasn't any empathy for him. Why did he feel like the only way to make the world know what he was suffering was to go out and murder a bunch of people? Why couldn't he have had a therapist or a counselor? Why couldn't he have been part of a church community? Why couldn't he have had a family that could give him that kind of empathy and validation? Why couldn't he have, been involved in the YMCA or the Boys and Girls Club or, but all these organizations are breaking down. Young people don't join churches. Young people don't join community organizations. Veterans organizations are falling apart. Kids don't even, they didn't even go to school. They sat on their computers for a year getting school over the computer. This is a problem. Parents and their kids don't trust each other. We are learning to be radical individuals. This is liberalism taken to its logical conclusion. Right? Where everyone's an atomized individual, all on their own. None of that brutal authoritarian collectivism, putting people in groups with other people. None of that learning to tolerate other people's flaws. None of that, dealing with stuff you don't like. None of that learning to have patience. None of that. No, none of that. None of that. Oh, no. None of that. It's all just individualism. You're an individual on your own. We've got the elite, the ruling class, the capitalists trying to suck as much money out of you as possible and trying to atomize you into an isolated, useful consumer, a useful battery in the matrix. That's what we got here. And of course, it's manifesting itself this way. And I can't be the only person who's smart enough to see these links. I can't be. There's got to be other people that see this, but they just don't care because the ultra rich, the Malthusian social engineers that are at the top of our society, they want this to keep happening. They want the death rate to be rising. They want more quote unquote useless eaters to die. And they ain't at Walmart shopping to get shot at. And this is the reality. The sinister social engineering of the ultra rich is playing out to its logical conclusion. And those are my thoughts on the Walmart. The Walmart incident. Now, I'm continuing with my opening remarks. Hey, we started a little earlier than the last two nights, right? And I know we're almost into an hour into this, and that's fine, right? I can keep going, right? I'm doing great. We're doing great. You all are here. You're enjoying this. This is great. The last part of my opening remarks, I wanted to talk about dialectical materialism. First question, what is dialectical materialism? Very important question, right? You would think everyone would know what dialectical materialism is, right? Because everyone in America knows that Karl Marx didn't work. Communism failed. Everyone's an expert on Marxism. But barely anyone knows about dialectical materialism. And long before Karl Marx was a communist, Karl Marx was a dialectical materialist. He was that before he was a communist. Did you know that? Before he was a communist, he was a dialectical materialist. He started out in philosophy, and then he moved into politics, and then he moved into economics. Karl Marx was a dialectical materialist. And this is the basis of Marxist philosophy. And dialectical materialism is this. Right? I've spelled it out for people before. I guess I have to write it out. And, I am not the first person to say this, right? I mean, this is in, I think, Dialectics of Nature by Friedrich Engels. Trotsky quotes it in Marxism in Our Time. I am not the first person to talk this way. This is a very common expression of dialectical materialism, but I'm writing it on this pad of paper, right? And no, it has nothing to do with Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand said her shit later. This was said long before Ayn Rand. This was in, this is Frederick Engels. This is Marx. This is the basis of the Marxist philosophy. A does not equal A, or A is not A. Right? That is the basis of the Marxist philosophy. And basically what it is that this first A can never be the same as this second A. No matter how close I drew it, no matter how similar they were, there are no two things in the universe that are exactly alike. And the universe is constantly in a state of change. The world is not static. The universe is constantly in flux, constantly in motion, constantly changing. You know, our body is made up of cells. Those cells are made up of molecules. Those molecules are made up of atoms. And those atoms are, energy, basically. They're protons and neutrons. They're energy, and they're energy. The universe is nothing but change, right? This is dialectical materialism. Dialectical materialism argues that all that exists is matter, right? There was a debate in philosophy between what they called idealism and materialism. Idealism is the belief that the mind creates reality. Classical idealism is the belief that God, in his mind, said, let there be light and let there be an earth, and that everything came into existence as a reflection of the thoughts of God. Or there's other forms of idealism, like The Secret, right? Where people sit there and go, money, 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 and they think money will happen, that thinking makes it so, that thought creates reality, that material is a reflection of thought. I think, therefore I am, was said by Descartes. Well, Marxists and materialists say, no, I am, therefore I think. That thought is inseparable from matter that thinks. Frederick Engels said that, that there is this thing called a brain. You have this material thing called a brain, and the brain thinks. And that thought is a material process because you have a material thing called a brain. Thought is inseparable from matter that thinks. Talk to ye, Caleb. Okay, talk to ye too, right? Have you ever believed ideology besides ML? And that is the materialism idealism debate. And Marx, he believed in materialism, but he had a special understanding of materialism because it was dialectical materialism. And that came from Hegel. Hegel had the concept of the dialectic, that the world is constantly in motion and that it is conflict between different forces that drives forward the contradiction. That it is conflict between different forces that drives forward the contradiction, right? That first you have a thesis, then you have an antithesis, they clash, and you get a synthesis. The synthesis becomes the new thesis, a new antithesis, and they clash, you get a new synthesis, and that this is the process. Oh, it's Kanye. Got it. See, I didn't get it. Right? Talk to Kanye, Caleb. Okay, I'll write that down. That's a good question. We'll talk about Kanye. That is the process of change, is through conflict. There are materials, but this matter is constantly in a state of motion, and it's constantly clashing, and there's constantly conflict, dialectic, and this conflict drives forward history. They talk about, heat, right? If we get to a state of absolute zero, there's no motion. But absolute zero exists almost nowhere in the universe. Everywhere in the universe, there's heat because there is conflict. There are atoms, and molecules banging into each other. There's motion, there's energy, and that energy is heat. And that the universe is based on conflict, things that cannot coincide with each other, clashing into each other, creating energy, driving forward history. That is dialectical materialism. That is the basis of Marxist philosophy. Dialectical materialism. And I have admitted that I am not a pure dialectical materialist. I'm not. And it's funny because I used to think I stopped being a dialectical materialist when I started believing in God again around 2015. But I realized I was never a true dialectical materialist. I do believe that change comes largely through struggle. I do believe that history is driven forward by class struggle and class contradictions, and that, contending social forces and economic forces. I accept a lot of it. In a lot of ways, I'm a historical and dialectical materialist, but I'm not completely true to it, because I've always believed in the power of ideas. And I don't necessarily think that ideas always reflect the underlying economic base. And I do believe in God and a higher spiritual power. And I'm not sure that the only reason human beings think is because we have this material thing called a brain. I do think that there is something in human beings that is separate from all other animals. We do have the spark of creativity. We do have the ability to make nature serve us, as Frederick Engels observed. And that's not just some natural result of the material world. I do believe human beings have a spiritual capacity. And I do believe that we can become connected to a higher power. And I do believe that ideas and truth and emotions are not simply material things. So I'm not a strict dialectical materialist. I'm not. I'm not a strict dialectical materialist. I never really have been. And what's interesting is that it was never demanded of me that I become one. The communist groups I was around never really made too much of a big deal out of this. One of the communist groups I was in really insisted you be an atheist, but I was only around them briefly. And then the other communist groups didn't really care about this. But this is the foundation. The foundation of the Marxist philosophy is dialectical materialism. And I realize, and I said, one of my most popular videos is called "What is Dialectical Materialism? A Quick 6-Minute Answer." It's a very popular video, on my YouTube channel, like 40,000 some views, very popular. It's one of my most popular videos where I gave an answer and explained it. And in that video, I admitted I'm not actually a full-on dialectical materialist. But today I was thinking about this, right? Because I've been reading, a lot of people that are critical. The LaRouche movement, the followers of Lyndon LaRouche, they vehemently reject dialectical materialism. They believe in the power of ideas, right? And that they will tell you this. I'm not tattling on them. They reject dialectical materialism. They do believe in the power of ideas. They're critical of Marxist materialism. And that's to their credit. And I don't speak for them. I'm not part of their organization. They're friendly with me, but they reject dialectical materialism. There's other organizations that reject dialectical materialism. I was reading critiques of dialectical materialism. And the most of the critiques made of dialectical materialism, this is interesting to me. Most of the critiques made of dialectical materialism argue that this notion that the universe is defined by conflict is wrong. And they point to many different things as examples of this. One example is the solar system. They point to the solar system and they say, look, you got the sun in the center, you got the planets revolving around it. It's not a conflict, it's oneness, it's unity. But a dialectical materialist looks at it and they say, no, there's conflict beneath the surface. The sun and its gravity is pulling on them, and they're being pulled by other forces in the universe, and that clash creates the energy that makes them keep going around the sun, and it's all about conflict. And a non-dialectician looks at it and says, no, it's the gravity makes everything fit into place. And it's that the sun is here and they're here and they know their perfect place, and there's this perfect alignment, and it's not conflict, it's order. It's not chaos and clashing, it's order. And I look at the solar system, and I think they're both right. It's both. There is gravity, there is conflict, and there's also order. It's both. And then another great example, this is an interesting one. This is a little R-rated, so if you're somebody who doesn't like, graphic things, I'll try not to be explicit here, but it's an example that must be given. Sex. The Sex Act, right? Those who are opponents of dialectical materialism will say, look, the ultimate act of creation is sex. When two human beings have sex with each other. And if you look at it, sex is not an act of conflict. It's two people loving each other, trusting each other, getting into an intimate moment with each other, and being intimate in that way. And when sex is a conflict, that's a very ugly thing called rape, right? And no one thinks rape is good, but sex the way it's supposed to be, sex within the context of a relationship that in producing a child, etc., is not an act of conflict. But the dialectical materialist looks at it and says, don't want to get too explicit here, but actually it is. The male body parts and the female body parts are in contradiction with one another, and they start clashing with each other. And if there's not a lot of conflict, and if they're not pushing against each other and combating and clashing with each other, it doesn't work. If you know anything about how sex is done, it is very much a conflict. It is very much a confrontation. And the non-dialectical materialist looks at it and it says, okay, yeah, in physical nature, there is a confrontational aspect to sex, but the nature of the act is to bring two people together. The nature of the act is people expressing intimacy with each other. I mean, this is, it's not that. And the more you think about the sex act, it's both. It's both. There is a conflicting attitude about it. There is a confrontation involved. There's also a deeply intimate oneness and unity involved. And that the universe is defined by both unity and conflict, unity and struggle. And you can't say that the nature of the universe is purely struggle. Struggle is a big part. Conflict, chaos, instability, confrontation is a big part of the universe. But oneness and unity and cohesion is another part of the universe. And that these are just two conflicting aspects of reality. And that, yes, I would agree. I have gotten to the point that I agree. Is Star Trek democratic, meritocratic, or socialist? I am at the point where I would agree that the root of some of the ugliest problems that we have had in our movement is the dialectic. And I've said this for a while, that the dialectical approach, the belief that change always comes through struggle, the change always comes through conflict, is the source of the weakness of our movement. The Cultural Revolution in China, that was a whole society. It is right to rebel. Kids, rise up against your teachers and parents. Tear down everything. Burn it down, tear it down. And it was a nightmare. China remembers the Cultural Revolution as a dark period in their history. And the Great Terror of 1937, when Yezhov Shina, when everyone in the Soviet Union, they thought there were Nazi spies everywhere. People were turning in their neighbors. People were turning in their friends. That was a dark period in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was doing amazing things economically, but that moment where everyone was punishing everyone else, everyone was turning in, that was a dark period. Right after the Cuban Revolution, when the Cuban Communist Party came to power, there were a lot of executions. And they took out a lot of people from the old government, from the Batista government, and put them to the firing squad. That wasn't a good thing. A lot of them were war criminals. A lot of them had been very corrupt, but it wasn't, dragging a bunch of people out and shooting them. You talk about the French Revolution. It was great to overturn feudalism in France, but listen to the French national anthem, the lyrics, let the impure blood water our field. This is this belief that conflict and confrontation is the basis of all the universe and all social change, and that what we are about is exacerbating and intensifying the contradiction. This is not a good way to look at the world. And I have lived that way. And from my own lived experience, I spent my 20s thinking this way. And I burned out on it after a while. You can't be full of hate all the time. You can't be full of anger all the time. I'm working on a video project. It'll probably be a while before it comes out, where I kind of go into, I talk about not details about my personal life, but rather how my views have changed, right? And that Trotsky, the reason that Trotsky's theory of permanent revolution was repudiated was the Soviet people didn't want to have permanent revolution. They didn't want to storm into the into Europe and have a permanent civil war. They wanted to have socialism in one country. And what people liked about the Soviet Union, what Anna Louise Strong writes about in her work, and what Edgar Snow writes about in his books on China, it's not that they had conflict and everyone was tearing it down and burning it down. It's the opposite. It's that they had unity. There may have been a revolution to bring the communists to power, but they didn't come to power in order to create chaos. They came to power in order to bring a level of unity. And that's when I talk about three forms of socialism. When the socialism that actually emerged from the Bolshevik Revolution and into the 20th century, now into the 21st century, it's not that dialectical philosophy. It's not that, change comes through conflict, rise up, tear it down. And that largely this was, that the French Revolution, people talk about the French Revolution, was a mass outpouring of rage and violence and sex. That it was the fact that feudal society, based on this belief that it was a belief in oneness, right? There's one God. He leads. He gives instructions to the Pope. The Pope gives divine right to the kings. Everyone has their place. Feudal society was based on this belief in pure oneness. And it was very repressive, and people were holding in their anger. People were holding in their sex drive all the time. There was a lot of injustice. And the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class, came along, and they said, now, if we want to come to power, all we have to do is give people permission to unleash their rage, unleash their sexual aggression, and we can create a social explosion so big, we can tear down feudalism. And it worked. There's a reason the Marquis de Sade was one of the main voices of the French Revolution, the Marquis de Sade. Why? The Marquis de Sade, from whom the term sadism is derived, the Marquis de Sade was a pornographer who was also an agitator, an atheist, and an agitator of the French Revolution. And he actually argued that having naked women on display, was the best propaganda for the French Revolution because it got people sexually aroused. And that in order to overthrow feudalism in France and in other places, the bourgeoisie went around and gave people permission to unleash their rage, their desire for violence, as well as their sexual desires. And it worked. And leftism became synonymous with that. Leftism was about rebellion. Leftism was about tear it down. Leftism was about sexual freedom. Leftism was about barricades and guillotines and violence. And this is the problem that our movement has had. And if you look at China today, that's not what communism is about. And starting with what Stalin did with the 5-year plans, and then later what Mao did, and Deng Xiaoping, and socialism nowadays is actually more about achieving oneness than about instability. But that drive to rebel, to unleash people's sexual impulses, to unleash people's rage, their desire for violence, that's coming from Western capitalism now. And this is a big point I've made in City Builders and Vandals and in my book on Kamala Harris and elsewhere. The drive for instability and violence, the dialectical worldview, which is all about burn it down, tear it down, destroy it, that's coming from Western capitalism now. Western capitalism is promoting that. And it's the socialist world that is saying, let's hold our society together. Let's keep people unified. Let's have economic growth. Let's not just go into this entropy caused by unlimited rage and violence. And so I look at this and I realize that I'm not a true dialectical materialist. I never was one. I thought I was, but I didn't really understand it. And starting in 2015, I realized, okay, I believe in God, but I never really was one. I did believe in the power of ideas. And starting around 2015, I was just so sick of the confrontation. I was just so sick of the burn it down, tear it down, that my worldview started changing. And I also realized, though, that there's a huge amount of truth in dialectical materialism. Conflict, contending social forces, that is a driver of history. You can't deny that there's a huge amount of truth in dialectical and historical materialism. However, it's not the only truth. You look at the Sex Act, you look at the solar system, dialectical materialism is half right. It's not completely right. Not completely right. That makes me realize that one of the problems that our movement has also faced is this attempt to impose a narrative that has the answer for everything. The universe does have many sides. The universe does indeed have many sides. There are different sides of reality. There is only one objective reality. Reality is not in the eye of the beholder. However, reality has different aspects to it. And if you build a movement on the notion that dialectical materialism, this is the one correct way of understanding the world, or as was previously done in feudal society and is now done by those with an anti-dialectical view, and you say, no, idealism is the one. If you do that, people are going to reject it. Because there's always going to be a part of people, and this is very dialectical, that's going to say, yeah, but what about? If you try to tell people that no, dialectical materialism is the one correct way of understanding the universe, there's going to be people saying, yeah, but what about all the things I just raised? I've had people, when I say A does not equal A, I've had people who are chemists, and they said to me, well, Caleb, I know what you're saying about there are slight differences, but if A does not equal A, chemical formulas don't work. That's a fair point. Right? If you're mixing two elements, one element has always got to be that element, or else you wouldn't be able to have a chemical formula. Right? That's true. Now, it may be that no item and no piece of substance is exactly like any other, but if you have a chemical formula and you need this much gold and this much silver, it's either gold or silver or it's not. That's a fair point as well. So if you try to say that you have a philosophy that defines all of reality, you're almost doomed to failure, because you're trying to impose a set of answers onto the world that is never going to be satisfactory. And that's always going to be a problem. People are going to push back against that because they're smart. Human beings are creative creatures. They are intelligent. If you try to impose an answer onto all of reality and say you have a worldview that defines all of reality and impose it, it's going to bounce back in your face. People are going to find some hole in it. They're going to reject it. If you demand everyone agree with you, right? If we tried to be, like a vanguard party formation in the CPI, and we said we want everyone in the organization to have the exact same position as us on everything, we wouldn't have much of an organization. It used to be you were able to do that kind of thing. I was in the Workers' World Party, and the Workers' World Party, they didn't just want you to agree with them about Palestine. They didn't just want you to agree with them about North Korea. They wanted you to agree with them about every historical event ever, about Hungary in 1956, about Czechoslovakia in 1968, about, peasant, And that is the classical ML way of doing things, is right. The party has a line on the steelworkers strike of 1919, and you better agree with it, right? And if you disagree, we struggle it out, right? Combat liberalism, we just struggle it out if you disagree. Well, people aren't going to agree. People are going to disagree, and you have to learn to work with people you disagree with. And this is what our enemies have taken advantage of. Our enemies, they push the opposite. Marxism says it has this totalist answer, dialectical materialism that explains everything. Well, our enemies say, well, actually, there's nothing that can explain everything. There is no truth. There's no point in life. There's no reason to be. Everything's just a matter of opinion. It's all hopeless. Ideology is a big totalitarian scam. And they bring the opposite message. They say there is no way to understand the world. There is no historical progress. There is no right and wrong. There is no moral purpose. And they just say there's nothing. And what they have done, more or less, is they picked up a weakness in our movement and they adjusted, right? It used to be that there was a totalistic ideology in the West called Christianity and American democracy in the true way. And that was the one totalist answer. And then there was communism, which was the alternative totalist answer. But then they realized, well, there is no totalist answer. And so if we just start getting everyone to think there is no truth, there is no purpose, everything will just fall apart. It was some brilliant jujitsu, using your enemy's strength against them. They said the Marxists are so good. They have this well thought out dialectical materialist ideology. So what we'll do is, instead of saying, well, we have this correct ideology, this old ideology, instead, we're just going to say there is no ideology. There is no truth. And it worked. It's been working. And now people need ideology. However, in order for people to accept ideology in our age, the ideology presented to them must be non-totalistic. And that's what we have to realize. If we are going to be successful in pushing ideology in our modern world, the ideology that we push must be non-totalistic. We must be willing to admit we don't know everything. We must be able to tolerate different interpretations. We must be willing to say there are different ways of understanding different events. That we can have an ideological framework with which we view the world, that there is struggle and conflict, that there's capitalists and workers, there's socialism and capitalism, there's the economic base and the superstructure. We can recognize all of that, but we can also say, but this ain't everything. This doesn't explain everything. It wasn't in Che Guevara's material interest to give up his life of wealth and luxury and go into the mountains to fight for the peasantry. It wasn't in his interest, but he did it. It's not in my material interest. I'll just tell you this much. It is not in my material interest to continue building the Center for Political Innovation. A number of people have said that to me. That is one of the most common comments I've gotten from people over the last few years. They said, Caleb, keep doing your streams. Caleb, keep making videos, writing articles, but don't build an organization. Look what happened. It looks like there's a lot of people that are damaged and psychologically damaged. You had some of those people in your organization, and they wrecked it because they're nuts and they're bonkers and they're full of hate and disgusting internal. And that's all true. So don't put yourself in danger like that again. That is the most common answer. Many people I respect, people I deeply respect, people whose work I've learned a lot from, people I admire, said to me, stop organizing. Stop organizing. The reason that you are in so much danger, Caleb, is because you're organizing. If you were just on the internet spouting off about philosophy, if you were just sitting at home writing books about the history of communism, No one would mess with you. But the reason that you are in danger, the reason that your personal private life is all over the internet, the reason that you have been, facing government harassment and legal harassment, the reason that you've been so viciously targeted on BreadTube and all of that is because you're organizing. Don't do it. You're too valuable. People have said this to me, Caleb, you're too valuable as a voice. Preserve your voice and stop organizing. Stop building a community. Save your voice, protect your voice by giving up your community. Don't have a community. Don't do it. I've listened to all these people very carefully, and honestly, they're right. They're right in that the reason I'm in more danger than other people, the reason I've been more viciously targeted than other people, is because I'm building a community. Because I'm trying to put these ideas into practice. I'm trying to get things done. They are right. But when I think about this, I think I can't stop. I can't stop. Because all I know is organizing. Even before I was involved in communist groups, I thought of communism as something you do in a group. I wanted to join a group of other communists. I wanted to make a revolution and get to socialism. And I joined groups and I learned the happiness and the joy that you can get from going out and doing things, putting up posters, leafleting, from, having an organization, from having an impact, right? And seeing that you and a group of other people have been able to get something done. That is the joy that I've experienced in my life. And what I talk about on these streams is all done in the context of having an organization, in the context of trying to move people to get stuff done, in the context of trying to build relationships, in the context of having people in my life who I work with politically to try and accomplish a common goal. So when people said to me, just don't organize, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know what that looks like. Communism for me is not, it is inherently tied up with organizing. It is inherently tied up with getting things done. After I was not in the Workers' World Party anymore, I was starting the Students and Youth for a New America clubs, and that evolved into CPI. I was having to do it because I don't know how to not organize. I don't know how to not build community. I know the point, Marx very famously said, philosophers have only thought to interpret the world or understand the world. The point, however, is to change it. That has been my understanding from the beginning. I don't know what it would look like to believe in these ideas, to believe in these philosophies, to understand the clashing social forces that exist, to understand the struggle between good and evil that is waging across our planet, to understand the satanic forces that run our government and their drive for a new world war, and how working families are struggling and so many people are being left behind. I do not understand what it would mean to have this understanding, this view of the world, and then somehow abstain. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how I would not do this. I know how I would do things differently. Some things that we will never do again. Obviously, a volunteer, full-time group, that will never happen again. John Brown volunteers never going to happen again. Other things are obviously going to be big changes. There's going to be very big changes. And there have already been discussions. There are some things that have to really, really change. And there's some things that have already changed. There's more things that are going to change. I have to do it differently. You have to do it very differently. But this notion that somehow I can believe all of this, somehow I can have this understanding of the world but not do anything about it, that I cannot comprehend it. That is beyond my comprehension. And honestly, if I wasn't looking to connect with other people, if I wasn't looking for a community, if I wasn't looking for a feeling of oneness and brotherhood, if I wasn't looking for the thrill of being in a group of people and connecting with them, I wouldn't think this way. I'd think something else. You know, if it wasn't for the spiritual power of being with a group of other people, I don't think I would take on these ideas. I don't think I'd be thinking about the danger of a new world war. I don't think I'd be thinking about Russia and China and Venezuela and Iran. I don't think I'd be thinking about the breakdown of capitalism and overproduction. I don't think I'd be thinking about any of that stuff if it wasn't for the fact that I see myself as part of a project to save humanity from a dying social order. I would never have I would not be part of this. I would not have ever thought this way. I would not have ever explored this. So to all the people, the well-meaning people who say, just stop organizing, Caleb, to protect yourself from these nut jobs, these, mentally ill, deranged, antisocial elements who end up, creeping into any organizing project that you get and bring all their toxic hate and trauma into the group and project it onto you. In order to protect yourself, stop organizing. All the well-meaning people that say that, I say, I'm sorry. I can't. I'll do it differently. Won't be any volunteers anymore. No full-time people. I'll protect myself. I'll be much more careful who I associate with. I'll be much more careful how I interact with people. I will do things very differently from now on. You got it. I have learned quite a lot from this experience, done a lot of reflections, etc. But at the same time, the people who say that I just have to stop, I can't. Sorry. Can't stop breathing. Can't stop going to the bathroom. Can't stop eating. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep building a community. I'll do it better. I'll learn from my mistakes. I'll learn from the shortcomings and the problems that we experienced. I'll sum up. But I'm going to keep going. And that's what I say to the well-meaning people who have reached out to me with great intentions, just wanting to see me safe and urged me to stop organizing. And I can't. Sorry. I can't. And to those people without good intentions, to those people who the only fulfilling thing they do in their life is try to stop me, try to tear me down. The only thing they do, they don't do any organizing. They don't do any activism. They just sit around going, how can we stop Caleb? I'm mad at Caleb. I'm jealous of Caleb. I want to destroy Caleb. To you people, you got a hard task ahead of you. You got a lot of work to do if you're going to take me down, because it ain't that easy. Because I've been through some shit in my life. I've made sacrifices before. I've made mistakes and I've learned from them, and I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. And if you think that it's just a matter of continuing to tear me down, continuing to harass me, continuing to make your whole life's mission about how to harass and make me miserable, if you think that's all it's going to take to make me stop, you are really, really deluding yourself, because I'm going to keep going. And you ain't. You ain't going to keep going. That's why we're in this mess to begin with. You know you ain't going to keep going. You know you ain't gone anywhere. You know all the doors I opened for you, you couldn't walk through them. That's why you're jealous of me. That's why you're resentful of me. And that's why the only thing that you can ever get your energy up and show dedication to is trying to stop me. Because I'm a walking, talking reminder of your own inadequacies and your own failures. That's what I am. And you'd be a much happier person if you worked on your inadequacies, worked on your failures, learned to like yourself more. Because me existing or not existing doesn't change you. I have had very little impact on your life, my friend, my ex-friend. I've had very little impact on your life. The whole time we've known each other, I've been going further and further up. And you've been sitting in the exact same spot. And that is not my doing. And in fact, the little motion that you've had in your life came from me. Came from doors I opened for you. It came from things that I pushed you to do. So don't blame your life circumstances on me. And don't sit around talking about how bad I am or how inferior I am to you. And how unfair it is that I'm where I am. Because that's not addressing your underlying problem. Your underlying problem is not me. I am not your underlying problem. I'm not your underlying problem. In fact, I helped you. Whatever my flaws are, whatever my mistakes are, I helped you. I'm not your problem. And the fact that you are obsessed with me, the fact that you can accomplish very little in your life, the fact that for the rest of your life, you're going to be bragging to people, look at Caleb. You know that guy, Caleb? Yeah, I'm the guy who arranged for, that's all you got going for you. That ain't my fault. That is not my fault. The fact that your one little claim to fame, your one achievement is that you have caused me problems. I'm talking to quite a few people here, not just one. That says a lot more about you than me. All right? I'm just telling you that. And no, I'm not. People in the chat are going off. I'm not talking to just one person. This applies to quite a few people. I ain't your problem. I'm here. I'm not bothering you. You have chosen to make yourself inadmissible in my circles and in my life. And that was your decision. But I'm not your problem. Your problem's much deeper than me. And whatever your problem is, I think it was easier to deal with. And this applies, again, to a number of people. Please, people in the chat, stop it. Right? We're talking about a number of people. I could, if I were naming names, which I am not doing, I could name lots of names here. Lots of people. There's people I don't even know. People I've never even met who this applies to. But if you were part of a community, if you were part of a group of people that were working for a similar goal, whatever is your problem would be much easier to deal with. If you were not alone, if you were not isolated, if you were not just bitter and sitting on the internet, your problem, whatever it is, would be much easier to deal with. And some of you, not all of you, had a community. Right? And again, I'm talking to a number of people here, but some of you had a community. You had a group of people who wanted to work with you. You had a group of people who were willing to accept you, who wanted you to succeed. They wanted you to accomplish things. And you were in a better spot then. And as much as you were frustrated, as much as it wasn't everything you'd hoped, you were in a better spot then. And you made a decision because of your own fears, your own resentment, your own jealousy, your own anger, your own frustration, your own awareness of real shortcomings and problems. You made a decision to cut yourself off from that community and to try and destroy that community. And that's on you. If I died tomorrow, if every book and every publication and every entity that had anything to do with CPI was completely erased from history, if I vanished into thin air, if Caleb Maupin had never existed, if the city building tendency and the Center for Political Innovation were just scrubbed from existence, if it was as if we had never been, if we were completely scrubbed out of reality, you would still be miserable. All the pain and all the resentment and all the problems that you have would still be there. And you know that. And you know that. So the obsession with me, the desire to somehow validate yourself, gain validation from harming me, is just purely self-deceit. It's self-deception and it's self-deceit. And you can listen to me right now. Again, I'm talking about multiple people right now. You can listen to me right now and hear what I'm saying, or you can just get angry with me. And that will be the effect of these remarks that I'm making. Either you will hear what I'm saying and realize I ain't your problem, or you will just fill with further rage and continue like a dog chasing your tail. I'll become your white whale, like Captain Ahab. Right? Captain Ahab in the novel Moby Dick, he spends his life chasing this whale to get revenge for the fact that this whale had crippled him. And that might be a great distraction from your pain. So maybe that's what you'll do. But maybe you'll realize there's something more going on than Caleb. Maybe you'll realize that I'm not as important, at least not in your universe, as you make me out to be. Some of the people I'm speaking about have never met me in their entire lives. Some of the people I'm speaking about haven't met me in years. They haven't spoken to me or interacted with me in years. But yet, I am their obsession. I would get texts from these people. Oh my God, Caleb. And I'm like, I don't think of who is this text from? I don't even know who it's from. I'm a big deal in your universe. But at the end of the day, I don't think I'm really a big deal. I think there's something else going on in your universe. And I don't pretend that I know what it is. And I'm not going to pretend that I know what it is. Don't know you that well. Don't want to. But there's something else going on in your universe. There is something else going on in your universe. And I am a stand-in for that. You have chosen me to be the poster boy, the image of what it is that you are mad about. I stand for something much bigger than me. I, Caleb Maupin, in your mind, I am something completely different. I stand for something that is very important to you, something that's driving you into a rage. There's a reason that I grind your gears. There's a reason that you fume with rage and you think about me all day long. There's a reason. And that reason has a lot more to do with you than me. And if you want to be happier, I would try to figure out what that is. That's my advice. Now, either take my advice or just get more angry with me. I don't know. I don't know what you're going to do. But you are not part of my reality anymore. I'm moving on. I've dealt with the situation. Problems have been addressed. And life goes on. And you can do what you want to do. And those are my opening remarks for tonight, everybody. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Names and locations, names and locations. Let's call you all out as I see you. Names and locations, names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. All right. Brad in St. Louis, Finn in Duluth, Jared from Virginia, Ryan in California, Temple City, Tyler in Missouri, David Rennie in Ontario, Fremont, California, Max Wells. Where's Max Wells? I got to roll up and find a Max Wells from Tennessee. Welcome. We got Jim in Harrisburg. We got Jenny Lynn from Cincinnati, John McCarthy in Chicago, Jamie in St. Paul, Nate in Chicago. Just driving, says David. Welcome, David. Kelly in Waterville, Maine, Alex from Brazil, Tim in Illinois, Riverside, California, Joe from San Francisco, Alex from Brazil, Randall from North Kentucky, Combate from Boston, Kieran from San Diego, Hugo from the Netherlands. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Oh, wow. Anaheim, Carlos Becerra. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Very good. Very, very good. Welcome, Carlos. We got Hugo from the Netherlands. We got Balthazar in Oakland, Rochester, New York, Bob Troy in New York. We got On the Couch. All right. Nigel in Liverpool, Yada Yisrael from Chicago, Liam from Auckland Museum, Germany, Klaus Kinski, Brian in Illinois. We got Chris in Austin, Texas, Upper Peninsula of Michigan, CD from Malta. Greetings from Germany, Karen Mendes. Very, very, very good. Very, very good. Cleveland Pirate Alex, Chris in Austin, Texas, Hendricks, good stuff. Micah in Las Vegas, A Better America in Michigan. Good stuff, folks. We got Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Good stuff, folks. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Greetings from Connecticut, says the Snowy Blizzard. There you go. All right. Killian from Milwaukee. From San Diego. Bang your fist. How's that? There you go. I banged my fist on request. Brighton from Vancouver. I just spent 3 hours off and on the internet defending Caleb. Well, good for you. Good for you. I appreciate the defense. I do. But you won't convince some people. I'll just tell you. You won't convince some people. And that's the sad thing about all of this, right? I mean, that's the sad thing about internet wars, right? That at the end of the day, people who want to hate me, I mean, people who want to hate me are going to hate me. And people who like what we do here are going to like me. And it has nothing to do with actual reality. And that's the sad thing about all of this, right? You know, it all just turns into this internet echo chamber. And, you know, same with Vosh. I mean, people who like Vosh, it doesn't matter. You can show them 100 different ways that Voss is a piece of shit. They still like Vosh. But people who hate me, you can show them 100 different ways that I'm good, and they insist on hating me. But then those of us who come here and see what we're doing here is special and see that I don't eat babies and that I'm not, you know, a Satanist and I'm not trying to run an evil sex cult. And, you know, I'm not secretly taking people to Venezuela to get them brainwashed by, you know, I mean, people who like what we do here and know that it's not vulgar and evil, they like it, you know, and that's the factor, right? No one is sitting there and weighing the facts rationally. No one's doing that. No one is doing that. And it's tragic, right? That you come here, you get a good vibe, you see what we're really about and you like us, or you sit on the internet and you people that you like to listen to told you to hate me, or I rubbed you the wrong way, or I take a position on North Korea that you don't like, or whatever. And then you decide to hate me. And that's just how the internet works. And it has absolutely nothing to do with reality. Absolutely nothing to do with reality. You know, and no one is sitting here looking over the facts of anything. And it's always like this. And it's toxic. It's absolutely toxic. And, you know, and that's why we just have to keep going. And that's why people who hate me, be gone. I block them. People are always like, well, Caleb, why do you block people? Because I don't want to engage with people. If people hate me, I'm not going to convince them not to hate me, right? I might have fun with them a little bit. Sometimes I have a little bit of fun with some of these accounts. You know what I mean? But other than that, you hate me, be gone. Be gone. You know, because I'm not going to make any progress with people who hate me. Sometimes you can gain something from like theatrically battling people for clout. It gets you attention, but you know, there you go. All right. So now we got a great list of super chats, to answer. So keep the super chats rolling in. Anything you want me to answer, by all means, shoot it my way. We'll go from there. So the first super chat question, wake up to U.S. imperialism without being woke. And that was from Jason. And it's kind of a provocative question. Wake up to U.S. imperialism without being woke. What does that mean? A couple things that come to mind. First of all, A lot of woke people haven't waken up to U.S. imperialism. I mean, look, Abby Martin, right? She runs Empire Files, for Christ's sakes. And she still takes this, this stupid pro-imperialist position on Ukraine. And, that's shocking to me. And Mike Preisner thinks that the pro-Ukraine mobilizations now are somehow good because it'll get people thinking about internationalism. They support the Russian peace movement, and they run Empire Files. They're supposed to be socialists and Marxists, but they don't get it. Right. Wokeness is interesting. When you say people wake up to imperialism without being woke, that reminds me, the story that I've told before is when I was in college, when Bush was leaving office, all of a sudden, and I went to a college full of Republicans and conservatives. They supported the war. If you didn't agree with the war, you were a traitor. Bush was a good man, a good president. Right as Obama was leaving office, they all turned into libertarians. And all of a sudden, they're worried about our freedoms under attack. And I'm thinking, where were you when Bush was torturing people and spying on people? And they were against the wars. Yeah, we spend too much money on these wars around the world. They don't really benefit us and all this. And they were kind of starting to realize that we're living into our police state, the prison industrial complex. They started sounding like on the issues, like they were kind of waking up. And then they explained ideologically what the issue was. Ideologically, the issue is we don't have real capitalism. We don't have real capitalism. America's socialist. Obama took over the banks and he took over the healthcare and he took over the auto industry. None of those things were nationalized by Obama, but, and they started espousing all this libertarian crap. And I was like, this is a problem. People are finally waking up, but they're waking up wrong. And I said to the socialists that I was working with in the Workers' World Party, we need to engage these people. We need to refute libertarian ideas. We need to win people away from libertarianism to socialism. They said, no, we don't. We just got to build the movement. And then we were not supposed to criticize Obama because that was disrespectful of the black community. We got to celebrate Obama's victory with the black community. And it was a huge mistake. We should have gone and engaged, not in a hostile way, with the Tea Party people. We should have not supported Obama. We should have not, and the reason at the end of the day, and I realize, and I fill with rage, the reason that they wouldn't do that, and they would say, well, there's no answer to right wingers and racists. Oh, we don't debate. No, bullshit. The reason that we were kind of tailing Obama, the reason that they just said, just build the movement, man, was because the leaders of the group were not ideological. They did not study Marxism. They did not understand Marxism. And if we engaged in an ideological offensive and started promoting socialist ideology and stuff, if we did that, they wouldn't get to be the center of attention. So we couldn't do it, right? The leaders of the group were movement hustlers who loved to stage liberal protests and realized that with Obama, under attack from the Tea Party, there might be new opportunities to get some funding to stage some liberal protests. And they wouldn't have been the center of attention if we went on an ideological offensive and started debating libertarians. So we couldn't do it because the group existed to glorify them and it existed for them to be the center of attention. And it was infuriating to me. And, I look back on it now and it makes me angry. I'm glad I'm doing this. I should have started doing this earlier. I got some opportunities. I was able to get where I got and such. So I don't completely, I don't completely repudiate a lot of the stuff I did, in the political groups I was part of. I did a lot of good work. I did a lot of good things and doors were open for me and I'm thankful for that and all that. But at the end of the day, what I was good at and what I was capable of doing, I was not enabled to do. And in fact, I had to fight and push back to do it more. And if I had just quit the group and started doing streams, things would have been different. And I kind of think, I don't regret being in the political group I was in, but I stayed too long. I tolerated the failures too long. But, I'll just tell you the honest to God truth. This is the honest to God truth. I tried to stay in the Workers' World Party. I tried to stay in. as bad as things were, as angry as I couldn't go to their office without feeling sick to my stomach and angry at them for their failures. But I tried to stay in because I knew that you don't gain anything by wrecking. I knew that we needed an organization. We needed a party. And especially with stuff going on in Ukraine and Syria, I wanted to continue working with the International Action Center. I wanted to continue working with them, and I tried, even when I resigned from the party, I kind of resigned in a way. I thought, let's resign in a way. If you read, there's a statement I wrote in like 2015. You read it, I carefully wrote it with the understanding that I could, maybe someday I could come back in. And I said, I love the party. I could still consider myself to be a member, but I'm stepping back and people shouldn't consider my journalistic work to be representing the group. I tried my hardest not to leave by slamming the door, not to burn bridges, not to leave in a hostile, angry way, because you don't gain anything by doing that. I tried to do that. And they made clear, the leaders of the group were so threatened by me that they made a point, and then the internet stuff started. And honestly, let me just say this, right? The internet has done a number on all of our brains. And I am convinced, I don't know this for a fact, this is just a feeling I have. So again, this is not academic. I'm starting to think that there's a big percentage of stuff on the internet that's fake. It's bots and trolls. Because every disagreement among Marxists and communists and leftists and communist groups and socialists and anti-imperialists gets blown up to ridiculous lengths. And some of that is just the algorithms incentivizing it. Look, whenever any drama happens with anybody, there are certain YouTube channels that just start streaming about it because it's a way to get views. They're grifting. They're using it to make a buck, right? And I don't respect that, and especially when they reach out to me. I mean, when they're covering things in a neutral way that's like giving attention to my enemies, but also giving attention to me, and they're trying to be friendly, but they're also talking out of both sides of their mouth because they're just trying to make a buck and get some drama. I don't respect that. Some of it is just incentivization. Some of it is just, if there's a tweet you disagree with, it's going to show up in your timeline because they want you to respond to it. So some of that is just incentivization. But I am starting to think that some of this stuff is just fake. Some of this stuff is just fake. Because again, there was no reason that I had to leave that organization. I left, I bent over backwards to try and leave in friendly terms. And then the internet stuff started. And I started hearing that I was a Nazi, that I was a white supremacist, and whatever disagreements there were blew up to ridiculous lengths. And that's why I ultimately, it ended up getting ugly. And I didn't want it to get ugly because I know in my experience, my limited experience, I was in my 20s at that point, my limited experience as an organizer, you don't accomplish anything when things get ugly. If you organize and build real shit in this world, the last thing you want is all the people you've worked with to burn bridges with them and have a big ugly falling out with them. Nobody benefits from that. And then it's awkward. A couple years later, you're in the same place that person is, and they see you, and it's awkward. And you could, and if you've had a big blow up with somebody on the internet, and then you have to go to a conference where they're at, you start to have a little bit of anxiety beforehand, and you don't want to go. And it's not pleasant because you had a big blow up with them. This is like, you learn through experience, right? And there's a reason that it's generally not good to have big blow up, throw down fights with people. But then again, if you feel attacked, if someone attacks you, you feel like you have to reply. And the way you reply generally involves somebody else being attacked by you, right? You've been attacked, so you got to punch back. And then that person feels they've been victimized by you, and then they have to reply, so they punch back. And then you have to reply, and it gets further and further uglier, and it goes further and further below the belt. It takes on a much more personal level. It starts out as a political disagreement, but it gets much more personal. First, how can anyone think Karl Marx supported Abraham Lincoln? Well, I happen to know more about history than Unholy Rome, so I point out that it does. No, that's stupid. Anyone who thinks Marx and Lincoln are connected is retarded. Well, now we've gone from a disagreement about me knowing more about history than him to me being retarded. Okay, and then we go, and then from there, as I start proving him wrong, then now all of a sudden I'm a Nazi, right? So a person of color, a black person, has just called me a white supremacist and a neo-Nazi and equated me with people who hang black men from trees. And now we're blood enemies. And now if he and I are ever in the same place, it's going to be fucking awkward. You know what I mean? And if I am about to go someplace and I say, hey, Mr. Unholy Rome, I don't even know what his real fucking name is. And now, if I ever find out I'm going to be in the same place as him, I might not show up. Now, I'd like to think that I'm strong enough to do that. And I'd like to think I would have bodyguards and supporters with me. There you go. What Ramsey Clark stood for was so close to what you teach. How did WWP justify promoting and collaborating with him while denouncing you? Oh, let's talk about that. Ramsey Clark, so close to what you teach. Did him denounce you? That's really a good question. All right. But anyhow, wake up to U.S. imperialism without being woke. I mean, wokeness is the biggest barrier to people waking up to the truth about U.S. imperialism because it's a fake. It's fake anti-imperialism. It gives you a new language and ideology with which to support imperialism that appears to be anti-imperialism. It appears the USA is atoning its anti-imperialist past. It appears that America has had a new makeover and that all the enemies of America are all what America used to be. Right? Now that America is cleansed of the crimes of colonialism and slavery, Russia is still a homophobic country. And so it's now cleansed, pure America can go tear down Russia for its homophobia. Right? It is a psyop. It is an attempt to change the terms of the debate. When neoconservatism and America Love It or Leave It died, they came up with wokeness. Wokeism is the new neoconservatism. So there you go. All right. Is there a potential for a second American Civil War by the end of the decade, if conditions continue to deteriorate? Of course, there is a chance of that. And there are divisions within the ruling class, and capitalism is necessitating divisions in the ruling class. Bonapartism, as the capitalist system crashes, the capitalists begin fighting with each other. They want the government to stabilize the economy. Yes, there is a chance of such a thing developing, but it is our job not to advocate it. It is our job not to present that as a good thing, because it wouldn't be good for us if that happened, right? There was a time in my life where, I thought that, oh, wow, capitalism is going to move toward fascism, and then we communists will lead the anti-fascist fight, and that'll be good. I'm sorry. The position we're in right now, we ain't leading shit. We ain't leading shit, right? I mean, imagine if there was a civil war today. That would be a nightmare, right? It would be wokeism versus Trumpism. Do you want to fight in a war for wokeism versus Trumpism? What side are you going to be on? Right? On the Trump side, you got a bunch of people who think racism isn't real, that immigrants are a bunch of drug dealers and rapists, and that Israel's awesome, and that Muslims are evil and terrorists. And on the woke side, you got a bunch of fucking idiots who think Marxism is a worker cooperative scheme, and that that Russia is fascist, and that war against Russia and war against China is awesome, and that the Communist Party USA of the 30s was fascist, and that wanting a workers' movement for healthcare is fascist, and anyone who's critical of the trans thing needs to be shut up and jailed. It would be an utter nightmare. A civil war of wokeism versus Trumpism would be such a fucking nightmare. I don't want that to happen. Now, I would assume that if it got to the point we were going to have some kind of civil war, the terms of the discourse would have gotten better. But it doesn't look that way to me. But right now, we're not having a civil war. Right now, the powers that be are enjoying this. Now, the powers that be are enjoying this. They're not threatened by either side. It's a culture war. Tulsi Gabbard has gone all in on one side of the trans issue because the left has gone all in on the other side. And so they're having a culture war about it. Ron DeSantis is anti-woke. The governor of California is pro-woke. And, we're having this big, and this isn't going to lead to a civil war. If civil war were to emerge, it would be about actual material forces. But we don't want that to happen. We don't want that to happen. We don't want there to be a civil war. How would a civil war benefit us in any conceivable way? Wouldn't be good for the country. It's a nightmare. Our job is to advocate a program to rescue the country by advancing the working class and by, using socialist methods and aligning with the anti-imperialist countries and dismantling imperialism. Our program should be a program to save the country, not a program to destroy the country. So there you go. There you go. Gerald Horne, Malefi, Asante, and Glenn Ford. Gerald Horne, I don't really like his thesis, which is that America was purely formed for the purpose of slavery. He echoes the, what do you call it? He echoes the, what is it called? He echoes the, oh shit, what is it called? He echoes the 1619 Project. They echo him. He argues the counter-revolution of 1776 and all that. I have disagreements with that narrative. I'm more in line with the W.E.B. Du Bois, William Z. Foster narrative that the American Revolution had a progressive side to it. I like, what the LaRouche people and Christian Parenti have written about Alexander Hamilton, and I'm not with Gerald Horne on that. But a lot of his analysis just seems like, Black nationalism, Pan-Africanism. I'm on board with that. So there you go. This next person, I don't know who that is. Malefi Asante. I don't know who that is. Glenn Ford was a great man. And I met Glenn Ford, the founder of blackagendareport.com. He was a great man. Glenn Ford was a dedicated anti-imperialist. He was a harsh critic of Obama. Wow. And he was an anti-imperialist. He stood up for Syria. He stood up for Libya and Gaddafi. Glenn Ford was an amazing human being, just an amazing, dynamic, brilliant analyst, economist, anti-imperialist. I have huge admiration for Glenn Ford. And blackagendareport.com is a great website that does great work. Was Clinton's success in easing relations with Vietnam and North Korea, was Clinton's something you would agree with? Yeah, I want the socialist countries of this world to have better economic relations with the United States. And one thing that really bugs me, I will say, is whenever a socialist country starts improving relations with the United States, there's like this internet backlash that starts where it's like, they've sold out. No, they haven't sold out. Cuba has wanted the blockade of Cuba to end for decades. And so when Obama went to Cuba and the Cuban embassy opened in Washington, D.C., and the U.S. embassy opened in Washington, D.C., these leftists are on the internet going, oh my God, Cuba sold out. No, Cuba didn't sell out. They got what they wanted, for Christ's sakes. They've been asking for the United States to end its blockade. And this was a step toward easing those sanctions, for Christ's sakes. I mean, that was ridiculous. And also, don't forget this, that when Obama went to Cuba, this is important. It's like a theme we're talking about tonight. It's all getting back to psychological manipulation. When Obama went to Cuba, I saw a news item go everywhere that was fake. There was a fake news item going all through social media. And that fake news item said that Cuba had agreed to turn over Assata Shakur, the Black liberation fighter. It was all over social media that as Cuba was normalizing relations with the United States, that Assata Shakur, the Black liberation fighter who fled to Cuba, Obama was going to turn her over. And that was a lie. It wasn't true. But a lot of people took the bait and were like, oh my God, I can't believe Cuba would betray Black Americans like this. And it didn't happen. It was a lie. It didn't happen. Never happened. And the Cuban embassy came out and clarified, we are not turning over Assata Shakur. Where do you think that news story came from? At the same time, the Obama administration is cultivating Black Lives Matter, making a big deal out of the fact that they are supporting the Black liberation movement. There's new nostalgia for the Black Panthers all over America because of Black Lives Matter, because of the Baltimore uprising, etc. And then Obama's normalizing relations with Cuba. And then all over the internet, oh, Cuba's going to turn over Assata Shakur. And they didn't do it. It was a lie. It was just a lie. It was just a lie designed to incite Black liberation activists against Cuba. It was a psyop. And they do this kind of shit all the time. Fake news. They just told us that Russia attacked Poland. The Associated Press just had to fire somebody. They had to fire somebody because the CIA, an anonymous intelligence official, told them that Russia attacked Poland. And they never bothered to check with Poland, to see if Poland thought Russia attacked them. So, yeah, I mean, you think they're not manipulating the media? You think they're not, they totally are. And yeah, North Korea, what happened with North Korea was that in the 90s, North Korea was having a food crisis, the Arduous March. It was created by the fact that North Korea needed petroleum in order to run their food system. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, the United States made it impossible for North Korea to get petroleum. And people were starving en masse. And there was refugees were fleeing into China. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. And at that moment, North Korea sensed there was going to be a pending attack. And so they announced that they were going to get nuclear weapons. And so Bill Clinton, I think he sent Madeleine Albright, and they made a deal. And what's amusing is Madeleine Albright, she met with Kim Jong-il. This is amusing. And she gave an interview about Kim Jong-il, and she said, he's actually an intelligent person. No shit. You think the leader of a country with tens of millions of people in it that's been up against the United States for decades and facing a blockade, you think he might be not retarded? I mean, it's shocking to me. It's utterly shocking to me. But Madeleine Albright was all that Kim Jong-il, he's a nice person. No shit. Or he's an intelligent man. Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought the leader of a country with millions of people in it that's managed to resist all-out imperialist attack, that he's actually not a bumbling fool? No kidding. But that was kind of special. And yeah, the Clinton administration, basically North Korea was threatening to get a nuclear weapon. They had the capability to get it. And Bill Clinton said, all right, let's ease tensions with them. And there was a government in South Korea that seemed more sympathetic to doing that. They talked about the sunshine policy. And so the Clinton administration was moving ahead and kind of, improving things with North Korea. And then the axis of evil speech, that failed. So there you go. So there you go. There you go. All right. Next question. And Vietnam. Yeah. I mean, Vietnam was having market reforms and, okay. That was part of that question. All right. Next question. Wokeness, is it rooted as a new secular civil religion? I've heard people argue that there's something Protestant about wokeness, right? I'm from the Protestant tradition, and they talk about the Protestant sees sin all around them. And they talk about Calvinism or whatever. They see sin all around them, and they want to declare war against the sinful world, right? They see a world filled with sin around them, and they want moral purity. And that comes from Haas. Doesn't Haas talk about all of that? And there's an element of truth in that, right? That wokeness started at a lot of these Ivy League schools, Harvard and Yale and Columbia, where you have some of these old money families and this kind of New England tradition where it is much more of this radical Protestantism. And that, among evangelicals, it's a little bit different, right? But among mainline Protestants, it's still the same. It's just much more liberal, right? That evangelicals are the Teletubbies are satanic, and the Teletubbies are satanic, and the TV is run by Satan or whatever. But then among mainline Protestants, you have a little bit of that too, right? You have a little bit of this we need to morally witness. We need to, Quakers, they want to speak truth to power. There's this feeling that the world is full of sin and evil. And so it is our obligation to reject the world, to call out the world. But then again, isn't all religion like that? I mean, I still feel that way. I mean, I'm a communist and I still feel that there is evil and sin all around me. I feel like the TV and the internet and the world is full of evil, and it is my moral obligation to condemn it. And I'm not woke. I don't like wokeness because I see the target as being the system, and I see people as being good. I see average people as being good, and I see it my necessity, my duty to find the good in other people, to morally appeal to other people, to try and make a moral appeal to other people, to try and help other people to do what's right, to find bonds with other people. So I'm not woke, and that wokeism is looking for the bad in other people. It's looking for tearing people down and condemning them and canceling them and showing that you're good and disavowing. Whereas it seems like, yeah, I mean, that's the difference. So, I mean, I can see that there's elements of like the Protestant moralistic demand, right? They talk about the New England, like Anna Louise Strong, my favorite writer, right? The communist Anna Louise Strong, right? This is the biography of Anna Louise Strong. It's called Right in Her Soul. And it talks about from the time she was a small child, she had this emotional desire to be right in her soul, right? That, to do the right thing, to do the moral thing. And she talks about this in her biography. The phrase right in her soul comes from her autobiography, which is called I Change Worlds. And she talks about she's had this drive to do the right thing, to make sacrifices for what is right, to be, in line with her conscience. This was something that was embedded in her by her father, who was a Protestant minister. And, that's a big theme. And Anna Louise Strong, she's one of these, Protestant, she went to Oberlin College and all of that. So there you go. I can see elements of that in wokeness, but ultimately, I mean, wokeness, religion, the nature of religion is bringing people together. The nature of religion is giving people a purpose and bringing people together. That's why they have church services, right? That's why they, and wokeness is about atomization largely. It's about isolation and atomization, virtue signaling in isolation and tearing down institutions, right? Wokeness isn't about building up communities, building up organizations. It's about atomization. I don't see new woke communities emerging. I don't see that. I see wokes complaining on the internet and tearing things down and forcing institutions to defensively come out and, paint Black Lives Matter on the sidewalk or whatever. But I don't see like a new woke community that's emerging. We're anti-racist, we're anti-sexist, we're pro-trans, and we're a community of people who care for each other and love each other and have these values. I don't see that. I do not see that in wokeness. I don't. Now I see institutions being kind of forced to go along with wokeness. Like I walked by, there's a, near where I used to work, there was a synagogue, right? That was a, what is it? It was a Reformed Jewish synagogue, right? And it had a rainbow flag in the mirror and it had a Black Lives Matter thing. But it's like that synagogue wasn't formed to be woke. It was just a Reformed Jewish synagogue, and wokeness came along and members of its community probably demanded that. And so it went along with it, and probably not very reluctantly, right? It's Reformed Judaism is very liberal. So probably not very reluctantly, but it's not like that institution was created by wokeness. It's just an institution that complied with wokeness. And I see that a lot. There's a lot of cities and communities and organizations that will comply with wokeness and go along with wokeness. But I don't see wokeness creating community. And that is a big part of religion. Religion has always been about creating community. So there you go. That's why I would say I don't see it as religion. Should a couple share the same political beliefs? No, I don't think it's necessary. It might make it easier, but it might not. My wife and I don't see eye to eye on a lot of political issues. My wife was never a communist. She did immigrant rights activism with communists, but she was never a communist. Hold on. She was never a communist. And we actually probably get along better because of that. I don't want to get into too much detail because you don't talk about personal stuff like this on the internet. But, if my wife were as all crazy and ideological and obsessed with this stuff as I was, we probably wouldn't have a very good marriage because we would disagree about this kind of thing and go head to head. But my wife thinks about other stuff, and that's good. And I think about this stuff, and my head is in this stuff all day long, and my wife's head is in other stuff. And we are able to be there for each other. This is one thing, I will throw this out there. Before I got married, I used to be very judgmental of people because of their partners. I used to be very judgmental of people because of their partners. I would meet somebody who was a very ideological Marxist, and then I would meet their girlfriend, their spouse, and they would not be. And I would be like, oh my God, you're supposed to be so ideological. Then you go date this dummy. I would meet somebody and I would meet their partner, and I would be like, wow, you're a nice, gentle person. Your partner is a very aggressive. And I would be very judgmental of people because people that I liked, often people that I liked that had things in common with me that I had good discussions with, I would meet their romantic partner, and their romantic partner was not like that. And I would be judgmental, and I would think very badly of the person. And now I realize that no, what they wanted from me, the good conversations they had with me, is not what they were looking for from their spouse. It's not what I'm looking for from my spouse. I didn't marry my spouse to have great discussions about dialectical materialism. That's not the purpose that my spouse serves in my life. It's not the purpose I serve in her life. And that the role of a romantic partner and the role of somebody that you have an intellectual, ideological relationship with is very different. Very different. Very, very different. And that part of the reason I had that resentment, right? It's kind of like in those, well, never mind. I don't want to get into too much detail, but as you start to understand how relationships work, you start to be less judgmental of people because relationships don't always serve the purpose you think that they serve. Again, if you want to taste a pear, you want to know what a pear tastes like, you have to bite into it. You have to bite into it. Next question. What is my opinion of the Party of Communists? A lot of great people in the Party of Communists. Chris O'Lally, awesome dude, has spoken at CPI conferences. He's in the Party of Communists. I've known Angelo for years. I know he's very dedicated. He's worked very hard at building the Party of Communists. I've never considered them the group that I want to join, but they have a good international line. They're sympathetic to People's Korea. They're sympathetic to China. They're sympathetic to Russia. They're one of the only other communist groups that has the courage to stand with the whole communist world. They take the same position on Donetsk and Donbass that Ukraine, that Cuba takes, that Venezuela takes, that Iran takes, that North Korea takes. Based on that, they're 100 miles ahead of all the other communist groups in America. Just because they're well embedded enough with the global communist movement, unlike CPUSA, that they actually take an anti-imperialist position on the Russia-Ukraine thing. That alone wins them my respect, and they're willing to, they're friendly to, CPI. They're, so I'm sympathetic to them. I think they're good people. I don't think I would ever join them. And CPI is an educational project, but there are PCUSA members in CPI, and we have no problem with dual membership. You can be a member of any communist group and join CPI. CPI is not a party. We are a think tank. We are a socialist education project. So if you are in PCUSA or any of the other communist groups, you're welcome to join. And yeah, I tend to have a more positive opinion of PCUSA compared to other communist groups. But, I don't think I would ever join them. And I could make criticisms of them, but I'm not going to make them here because it's not appropriate. Right? This isn't the appropriate venue for me to just spout off about all the negative things about them because, how would that foster unity? Right? I want to praise the good. When I see a communist group that has an awesome, charismatic leader in it, like Chris O'Lally, I like him. When I see a communist group that's taking good positions on Donbass and the war in Ukraine and all that, I like them. When I see a communist group that, unlike the CPUSA, maintains a relationship with North Korea, I like them. And if I were to get on here and just go on about my differences with PCUSA, that wouldn't accomplish anything, right? And I'm telling you that for a communist group, compared to the other ones, they're pretty high on the list of good groups. So, again, for my own reasons, I would probably never join. I do have criticisms of them, but they're overall, of all the groups out there, they're pretty decent. All right. Now, this person said Edward Bernays was the nephew of Reed Hastings, the Netflix CEO. That's fascinating. I didn't realize that. I don't know what there is to say about it. Don't know what there is to say about it. Edward Bernays, the father of propaganda. There's the story about the women smoking. He made smoking sexy. He was involved in all kinds of propaganda for the U.S. government. And is the fact that a relative of his is involved with Netflix. This is proof that, what do you take from that? That doesn't necessarily mean that Netflix is employing the same kind of propaganda that Edward Bernays is taking. One does not necessarily flow from the other, but I do think Netflix is a propaganda outlet that is encouraging suicide, that is doing other unethical things. So, that would feed my case, but I don't want to make that like my sole argument, because that doesn't, just because someone's related to somebody else doesn't necessarily prove anything. All right. Is Saudi Arabia the most repressive and authoritarian country in the world? I don't know. How do you measure that? What is the measurement of a country being repressive and authoritarian? I think a strong argument could be made for that, right? They have the death penalty there. They have an autocratic monarchy. But, I don't know, because you would have to establish a criteria by which a country would be judged for that. And then you would have to make sure that Saudi Arabia was the most under your criteria. And I haven't done that. It seems like it would be pretty high up there with the, autocratic monarchy. The king owns the whole country. A third of the country are guest worker slaves who have absolutely no rights, public beheadings. That would all seem like something that might lead in that direction. But I can't say that for a fact. I haven't done a study of it. And if you had asked me, is Saudi Arabia a repressive and autocratic country, I would have said yes. But when you ask me, is Saudi Arabia the most, that's something I can't say without doing proper research. So there you go. All right. Thoughts on classical liberalism? John Stuart Mill and John Locke. Well, John Locke is life, liberty, and property. And the context of classical liberalism is that feudalism, the feudal system, was being overthrown, right? And feudalism is very, very oppressive of the individual. The individual is basically suffocated. You're born into your class position. You're assigned. You're told you have to do this, the divine right. If you even so much as think a critical thought, you're going to hell. So because of that, feudalism is very, very repressive of the individual. So classical liberalism, it's a necessary stage, right? You had to have classical liberalism to break with feudalism. It was like breaking free from feudalism. Classical liberalism was necessary. But now we live in liberalism in decay. This is liberalism taken to its toxic logical conclusions. That's dangerous. But liberalism in and of itself was necessary at one point, because you can't have feudalism forever. Feudalism was breaking down. Humanity was ready to march ahead. Feudalism was holding back historical progress and technological progress. And so because of that, it was necessary to break with feudalism. And classical liberalism was a means by which feudalism could be broken with. All right. Have you ever believed in an ideology besides ML? Sure. I was a Christian when I was a kid. I was raised to be a Christian, and Christianity is an ideology other than ML, right? And I got Christian upbringing. I went to Sunday school when I was a kid. Christianity is an ideology, and it is not Marxist-Leninist. It's not materialist. It's not dialectical. So there you go. When I was a kid, so much of my thinking Classic story. This is classic. When I was in high school, I was really getting into communism. I was promoting communism. And like my whole school, all my classmates were all Republicans. So I remember this girl came to my school one day and she took me aside and she said, Caleb, I think my mom is turning into a communist. And I said, why? And I said, she said, she really likes Michael Moore. And I laughed about that because, Michael Moore wasn't a communist, but it made sense because everyone was a Republican. And I was the only one saying Michael Moore-ish like things, like the war in Iraq was based on lies. And so in her mind, it made sense. There are Republicans and communists like Caleb. And that shows polarization, mind you, right? That's kind of how Mao was able to take power, right? It's like you imagine like somebody came up to Mao and they said, Mao, I think I'm starting to turn into a communist. I don't like Chiang Kai-shek, right? And that's how polarization in revolutions, you have what's called polarization, right? Somebody walked up to, Lenin and the Bolsheviks. I think I'm starting to turn into a Bolshevik. I'm against World War I. And this is how revolutionary parties tend to take power, right? The issue at hand is not the ideology of communism versus the ideology of capitalism. The issue in Russia in 1917 was, are we going to continue World War I? There were a whole lot of people who walked up to Lenin and said, you're against the war. You're the big anti-war group. I guess you're the good one. Mao was fighting Chiang Kai-shek, and Chiang Kai-shek was a buffoon, and Chiang Kai-shek wrecked China's currency, right? China's currency crashed. And even some of the rich people went to Mao and said, all right, I guess I'm with the communists, and that this is polarization. And so that was an example of polarization. Her mom wasn't becoming a communist, but in the context of that classroom where we argued about politics in social studies class every day, I was the only one saying Michael Moore-ish things, and I was a communist. So for her to say, I think my mom's turning into a communist because she's starting to like Michael Moore, that sounded, that's how these things tend to work. You can't, in this society, you absorb all kinds of ideologies, right? I had a Christian upbringing. I was a member of a church. My family was very active in the church. On top of that, in school, you learn liberalism, right? My parents were liberals, and you learn the liberal ideology, right? I read 1984 on my own because I had an uncle. Or not an uncle. He wasn't an uncle. He was a cousin. He was actually kind of a far rightist. He voted for the Constitution Party rather than the Republican Party. He was a conservative. And he said to me one time, you really ought to read this book called 1984. So I think I was in like 4th, 5th grade. I went and got 1984 by George Orwell, and I read it. And I was like, whoa, like I'd never read anything like that. It blew my mind, but it was just a liberal screed against totalitarianism and all of that. And I thought it was amazing. And I was using 1984. I'm like, this is what's wrong with conservatives. This is what's wrong with all the evangelicals. They all think ignorance is strength. They all, they all think war is peace. Oh my God. It's, and I read George Orwell. Then years later, we read it in school, and it was a little bit different, but so I was heavily influenced by liberalism at one point in my life. I don't know. You absorb, when you walk around this society, you tend to absorb a lot of different ideologies. But yeah, I was brought up in a Christian environment, but a moderate Christian environment. I absorbed a lot of liberalism, but I was in a very conservative area. And then when I was 15, I became a communist. And it was very helpful. It clarified a lot of things. Things kind of snapped together. It was part of me figuring things out. So there you go. All right. Talk to Kanye. Okay. Kanye West wanted to come on here. I don't agree with his anti-Semitism. Obviously, I don't embrace any form of bigotry. But if Kanye wanted to come on here, I'd talk to him. Sure. Yeah. I would let Kanye come on this channel. All right. Next question. Is Star Trek democratic, meritocratic, or socialist? Many people have pointed out that the society in Star Trek is some kind of futuristic communistic society. They don't have money. They have these replicators, so everyone kind of has what they need. And it's, I believe the backstory of Star Trek is that there's a nuclear war. And after the nuclear war is over, like there's very few humans left. And then what is it? The Vulcans come down and bring them warp speed technology or whatever it's called. And the new government after the nuclear war has combined the best elements of both communism and capitalism or something. And then they have the new technology from the Vulcans or something. I know way too much about this. Why do I know this? I'm not a Trekkie. Why do I know this? I watched it some when I was a kid. Why do I know this? I mean, I'm almost embarrassed that I know all of this, but there you go. There you go. All righty. Will Pakistan balkanize in the next 5 to 10 years? I sure hope not. That would be a setback, right? Because the China-Pakistan economic corridor is one of the most important aspects of developing Eurasia that China is involved with. And that would balkanization of Balkanization of Pakistan would be a setback. It would mean that a country that is economically developing would be more divided. That would not be good for anybody. But it could happen. I mean, I know that there's regions of Pakistan that are very mountainous and very tribal, and there's a lot of Islamic and Islamist forces there. There's more secular forces in the cities, and there's division about China in Pakistan and such, and it could happen, and that wouldn't be good for the world. But that may be the operation that the United States is working on, but it wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be good if that happened. All right, next question. All right. Ramsey Clark, this is a good question. Ramsey Clark is so close to what you teach. How did Workers' World Party work with him but not denounce you? Ramsey Clark was an interesting figure. Workers' World Party attached to Ramsey Clark, and Ramsey Clark built the International Action Center, and they staffed the International Action Center. Ramsey Clark was the director of the International Action Center. At Workers' World Party, they were all the co-directors or Workers' World Party people. But there was always this feeling that Ramsey Clark is Ramsey Clark. Access to him was restricted, which is fair. When you have someone that prominent in your group, you can't just have anyone walk up to them off the street. But, like Ramsey Clark defending Lyndon LaRouche. I asked somebody about that one time, and we were taught that Lyndon LaRouche was a fascist, was all these evil things. And, and I said, well, what about Ramsey Clark defending Lyndon LaRouche? And, they took me aside and they said, well, Ramsey's not where we're at on everything, and I think Ramsey saw that the government was going after him, and I think they have international connections, and, it was just, and there were other things about Ramsey Clark that people raised. And that, Ramsey Clark was not a member of the Workers' World Party. Workers' World Party had an alliance with them, and that he was very close to them, very friendly. And I think Ramsey Clark, he seemed like a communist to me. The way he talked about Prachanda in Nepal, he expressed admiration. He said to Prachanda, the future of Southeast Asia is in your hands. And he had a particular admiration, fondness of Prachanda. The way he spoke about Saddam Hussein, Ba'athist Arab socialism in a positive light. I wrote it down. All of that, I think, he was a communist, but he wasn't like an ideological communist. He never talked about Marxism, Leninism. He never talked about dialectical materialism or anything like that. He was an anti-imperialist, and that made him sympathetic to communists, but he wasn't an ideological communist. He was an anti-capitalist. He criticized capitalism in some of his writings. And he was very much an opponent of the U.S. political structure. He knew how corrupt it was from the inside. He had been in the inner circles. He'd been at the Department of Justice for years, and he knew how corrupt it was. And he knew how evil the U.S. criminal justice system is and how rigged it is against poor people. And he'd spent his entire time as Attorney General basically fighting J. Edgar Hoover. That's one of the most infuriating things is these people try to say, oh, Caleb used to work for Ramsey Clark, and Ramsey Clark ran COINTELPRO. Ramsey Clark did not run COINTELPRO. Ramsey Clark fought COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO was by J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI. And in my video tribute to Ramsey Clark, I found a recording of Lyndon Johnson talking to Ramsey Clark on the phone. And it's a recorded conversation between the President of the United States and Ramsey Clark. And Lyndon Johnson very carefully says, what about Edgar? How's it going with Edgar? And he says, well, And they're being very careful what they say because they know it's a presidential conversation. Ramsey Clark hated J. Edgar Hoover, and he hated COINTELPRO, and he was actually impeached at one point. He was brought up for charges facing impeachment because he refused to allow the wiretapping of Stokely Carmichael, the Black Panther, the Black revolutionary leader, and that he knew that COINTELPRO was happening, and he was actively trying to stop it. And the FBI had too much power. Even though he was in theory the boss of the FBI was its own institution that had its own agenda and its own power. And he was the head of the Department of Justice, and he supported the civil rights movement, right? He felt that it was the job of the DOJ to make sure that the Southern police didn't, he thought the civil rights movement, he was from that Kennedy school of liberalism. This is before he was radical. He was like a Kennedy liberal, and he thought it was the duty of the federal Department of Justice to protect the, the civil rights movement. And the FBI was actively trying to beat back the civil rights movement. And you read his memoirs and all that. He was opposing COINTELPRO. He was furious about it. He knew about it, and he couldn't talk about it publicly. And he said things to that effect. If you read Ramsey Clark's writings, he said, I knew COINTELPRO was going on. There's people who say he's hinted that he knew that there might have been some kind of plot to kill MLK or something, but he was a federal government employee, and it was confidential. It was classified information, and he knew that the FBI was going after the civil rights movement, and he did expose it years later, and he did talk about COINTELPRO, and he knew that COINTELPRO was going on, and he was trying to stop it and trying to restrict it. But this idea that he's the guy who presided over COINTELPRO, it's like, no, J. Edgar Hoover was doing COINTELPRO. J. Edgar Hoover was a conservative. And when Nixon got in, Richard Nixon said, the first thing I will do when I'm president is fire Ramsey Clark. And he did. And then Nixon told J. Edgar Hoover to take the gloves off. And J. Edgar Hoover then escalated COINTELPRO. And everyone saw that after Nixon got in, there was a huge escalation of COINTELPRO because Ramsey Clark wasn't there holding them back anymore. Like, these people don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. When people say, oh, Caleb used to work for the COINTELPRO guy. How can you call Ramsey Clark, the guy who was like the top anti-imperialist, you can say he's the COINTELPRO guy? These people have no idea what they're talking about. It's infuriating to me. You don't want to respond to these people directly because it creates drama. It gives them cred. But it's like when someone baited me, one of these prominent know-it-all bread tubers, doesn't know what they're talking about, said, oh, Caleb used to work for Ramsey Clark, the COINTELPRO guy. I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, this was J. Edgar Hoover's biggest enemy. This is somebody that Nixon fired. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. It's not that simple. And I know it because I knew Ramsey Clark, and I didn't know him intimately, but I went over to his apartment a number of times. I had conversations with him. I asked people about this. I've done my research. I know who Ramsey Clark is, and he was a huge advocate of civil liberties. He was a leftist. He was Saddam Hussein's lawyer. He was Milosevic's lawyer. He was getting arrested in anti-war protests. He violated the sanctions on Iraq. It was so heroic. Former Department of Justice Attorney General in the 90s, when the U.S. government is starving Iraq, he goes to the airport with a bunch of medicine and a bunch of chlorine and a bunch of things that are banned under the sanctions. And he has a press conference. He says, I'm violating the sanctions. I'm taking all of this medicine to Iraq because the sanctions on Iraq are genocidal. And he gets on this plane with all of this medicine, all these things, and delivers it to the Iraqi people, challenging the genocidal sanctions. And he hopes that they'll prosecute him. He wants to be prosecuted. He wants them to bring criminal charges against him for violating so he can reveal it for the world. He wanted to go to prison for it. And they wouldn't charge him because they knew it would be bad publicity for the United States. The sanctions on Iraq in the 90s were indefensible. They killed hundreds of thousands of people. This Ramsey Clark, and you call Ramsey Clark the COINTELPRO guy. It's like you have no idea what you're talking about. He was such a hero. And yeah, he didn't agree with, he wasn't a Workers' World Party leftist, right? He was more, he came out of Kennedy liberalism. He moved into like anti-imperialism, and he was very much against the American deep state. He'd been in the government. He knew how evil the FBI was. He knew how evil the COINTELPRO stuff was, how evil the Pentagon was. And he was very interested in the back room and the different factions. And he knew a lot about the different factions among the ruling elite and the ruling class, the different families in American politics and the different corporations and the influence that they have. But was he, I mean, I don't know. I don't, I mean, he was not he wasn't a Marcyite. He wasn't an ideological Workers' World Party member. He had no hostility toward Lyndon LaRouche. He believed in economic development, and he was never an ideological Marxist, I guess. He was a revolutionary anti-imperialist. So there you go. And that's why, yeah, Workers' World was an ideological communist group that had a line. Ramsey Clark wasn't that. He was an anti-imperialist. He was somebody who'd been in the American power structure and broke with it in order to do good and to stand with anti-imperialist forces. And also he was a pragmatist. He wanted to get shit done. That's why he worked with the Workers' World Party people. He's like, oh, these are a group of people that want to get shit done. I want to get shit done. I want to build this international action center that will challenge the sanctions on Iraq, will stage anti-war protests. These people want to do it with me. Okay. And he worked with them, right? He wanted to get real shit done. There you go. All right. Makhno's decentralized Marxism. Well, the Makhno, that uprising in Ukraine, I mean, during the middle of the Russian Civil War, when you've got, 15 countries invading the Soviet Union needed to have centralized leadership in order to defeat the 15 countries that invaded them. And you had the Kronstadt sailors who said Soviets without communists. We want to maintain regional autonomy. Well, anybody knows that if your country's being invaded and you're having an all-out civil war, you can't have every region just do whatever they want. And it seems like Makhno, he believed in this. Well, he wanted this regional, decentralized Marxism. In the face of an all-out invasion, you can't do that. You can't do that. So there you go. All right. Utilizing vets and anti-imperialist veterans, the most important anti-imperialist voices. They're some of the most important people who've been in the wars. They've seen it and they realized, and that they say, we fought over there and these wars need to end. They're the most important anti-war voices. The Vietnam veterans who opposed the war and all of that, they're some of the most important, and and right now the most anti-war voices are coming at this point. They are coming from the Pentagon, right? It's a lot of people in the military. I mean, Ron Paul got huge donations from the military. There's a lot of people in the military that are realizing that World War III with Russia is not a good idea. So how can communists convince Americans that the state should control production when they view the state as corrupt, inept, and oppressive? Okay. So, yeah, I think, right now, I think that the hope for the United States is probably going to come from within the military industrial complex. I think there's a lot of people within the military apparatus that are simply, they're simply pragmatists. They realize that fighting Russia and China is not a good future for the United States. It's not going to be good for the US economy, and that, that it's not practical. And I think actually, in a weird, ironic way, it seems like, the anti-war stuff we're hearing now is coming from military people who realize, the reality of the situation, that Russia and China are going to keep rising. And it'd be better to team up with them than to oppose them this way. But there you go. Why was Lyndon LaRouche called a fascist? And I could answer that in a couple different ways. First of all, I don't represent them. You know what I mean? Their viewer is different than mine. I respect them. They're doing amazing work. I mean, the way that they've been going to the town halls, the role that Diane Sayer played in the primary here in New York, awesome. Okay. Absolutely awesome. But that said, I don't represent them, but I can tell you why I think that they are being labeled that way. The reason that they're being labeled that way, they've been labeled that way. I think the most clear reason is because they're not part of the club. Lyndon LaRouche was this Trotskyist. He was in the Socialist Workers' Party. He was a very smart man, an intellectual. And if you read some of the attacks on them by people who knew him when he was a Trotskyist, he was too smart, right? A lot of these communist groups, they just want like dumb people who will repeat the slogans. He was an intellectual. He was very well thought out. He was too smart. He was asking tough questions. He started to come to the conclusion, and this seems to be like a theme of his work, that the liberals are the main danger. That's one of his beliefs, right? And I think that goes back to, if you read some of these Trotskyite memoirs by people who knew him when he was still a Trotskyist, there's a couple of them, right? That in right in this book, this is the memoir of Tim Woolforth, who was a leader of a Trotskyist group. He thought that, Lyndon LaRouche believed that the liberals were the main enemy. That's what he believed. That the liberals were the main danger. And that was just a central part of his beliefs. And he believed that, and he came to that conclusion. And based on things like the Congress for Cultural Freedom, based on the drug culture, which he saw as very problematic, despite having, a Marxist critique of capitalism, the belief that the means of production should be rationally organized and planned, and opposing the free market, he saw the liberals as kind of the main danger for their cultural movements that he saw as very dangerous and toxic to society. And he came to that conclusion, and he was much smarter than your average leftist. He was in the SWP for a while. He broke with the SWP, and then he started just teaching his own classes. He started teaching classes on Marxism, just on his own. And as somebody who knows how the left works, I know immediately they were all talking shit about him, because the way the left works, the left is very, very, very much a cliquish group of people. They don't want anybody who's not part of the club, the left forum, right? It's all so cliquish, and it's so, anyone who's on the outside, anyone who questions things. And the fact that he did believe that the liberals were the main danger for his reasons, that, drove them crazy, because we all know that what the communist groups do at the end of the day is they're just kind of foot soldiers for the liberals. So because he thought the liberals were the main danger, because he wasn't part of the club, right? And, back then it was people like Paul Sweezy, and there were certain academic voices that were the main Marxists, and they didn't like him, and he wasn't one of them. And he had the audacity to teach classes on Marxism when he wasn't part of the club. People say that about me. I teach classes on Marxism, and you know what? I don't have a degree. I haven't gone to university. I haven't, I'm not, I'm not published by what is it, Verso or whatever. And it's like, no, Caleb can't give classes on Marxism, because to give classes on Marxism, you have to be approved by the Marxism University. There's this whole academic left of people that get approved by the American university system and write books that are published at Barnes and Noble. And I'm not part of it. So there's a lot of people that are infuriated that I'm allowed to be on here right now talking about Marxism. Vosh, I guess it's okay for Vosh to do it, even though he doesn't know what he's talking about. But me, it's like, how does Caleb? He gave a class. I mean, it's like there is this cliquishness where it's like there is this, David Harvey and who is it? David Harvey and certain people, certain academics. They're the people that are allowed to talk about Marxism. What's his name? The guy who sniffs, what's his name? Slavoj Žižek and all of that. These are the people that are appointed by academia to be the Marxists. And if you're not them, how dare you? How dare you? You're cheating, right? It's like you're supposed to go through their classes for 12 years of your life and get a PhD learning from them and learning their crap that's not anti-imperialist, not connected to building any revolutionary organization. Totally serves the liberals. You're supposed to learn all that crap that's disconnected from Russia and China and Cuba and Venezuela. That's, you're supposed to learn their academic Marxism. And then once you've filled your head with that, then you might be allowed to give classes, right? But I learned my Marxism in Venezuela. I learned my Marxism from the global communist movement in Russia, in Iran, in anti-imperialist countries. I learned my Marxism from the forces around the world that are fighting imperialism. And I'm a guy, and I appear on RT, on international media, and my expertise and my political commentary was utilized by RT as a commentator and an analyst before that. You know, and I have, you know, proved that I know what I'm talking about. I've published books, I've spoken at international conferences, but the people who approved me, the people who vetted me and allowed me to advance are not part of the club. It wasn't Yale, it wasn't Harvard, it wasn't David Harvey, it wasn't, the Center for Economic Studies at the University of, they're not the ones that approved me. I've been approved to talk about Marxism by people who they don't consider to be legit. It's almost like I got a degree from a university. I mean, I don't literally have a degree from a university, but I have a degree from a university they don't consider to be recognized, right? They don't consider my background to qualify me to talk about it. I'm supposed to hate all socialist countries. I'm supposed to wank about surplus value. I'm supposed to be really into Adorno and Sontag and all of that. I'm supposed to be, Chris Morlock has got it right, an academic State Department socialist. And because I'm not that, it's like, how dare you, right? They all want to be teaching classes on Marxism, but they've been told that in order to get vetted by this, this American Marxist academic establishment, you have to be silent for 12 years while they pump your head full of anti-communism and academic shit. I didn't do that. I learned my Marxism from the struggle. I learned, the books that I've read have always been activist books from the Communist Party USA in the 1930s or from Marxist leaders around the world like Kim Il-sung and Fidel Castro. The Marxism that I espouse, is the Marxism of the revolutionary movement around the world. That's where I learned it from, not from circle jerking academia. Right? That's where I learned it from. And it drives them crazy. And it's the same with LaRouche. LaRouche had no degree. He had never been to college, right? And how dare he, and LaRouche was brilliant, right? You read his writing, he was a brilliant writer. And you read it even back when he was a Marxist, brilliant understanding. Dialectical Economy is a great book that I've learned a lot from. He was a brilliant man. And how dare he, right? How dare he, right? Everyone gets smart by taking classes at Harvard and Yale and getting vetted. And he didn't do that. And he was teaching Marxism. So that was the first strike against him. He was not in their club. Second strike against him was that he said the liberals were the main danger. And I think at this point, he's been proven correct. Back then, that may not have been the case. He was kind of ahead of his time. And often, that's one thing I will say for very intelligent people, is often it's almost like a dog, and I'm not calling LaRouche a dog. I'm making a point. You know what a dog whistle is, right? Like a literal dog whistle. So if you blow, no one hears anything, but the dog goes rah, 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 because he hears on a different frequency. He's tuned into things that human ears are not tuned into. And the smartest people that I've known in my life, I'll be honest with you, are people that are tuned into things that the rest of us are not. And I don't know what it is. And often they're not tuned into other things. Often they're not tuned into like important stuff. And I say to them, hey, what do you think about like something that just happened? They don't know about it, but they're paying very close attention to some other stuff that's going on that is very important, right? And that Lyndon LaRouche was a visionary, and he was a brilliant man in a lot of ways, and he understood the big picture, I think, more than other Marxists did. He saw, you read his book, The Earth's Next 50 Years, he saw that there's a chapter called The Eurasian Future, right? I mean, he was talking about build the new Silk Road and all this, like in the 80s. People saw posters. It looks like science fiction with these trains running across all the way from China into Europe. And people thought it was crazy science fiction. Well, it's coming true now, right? So he was very tuned into how the world was moving. He understood the world economy. He was on top of things that other people were ignoring. That's true. But because of that, he came to the conclusion very early on, like in the 60s, that the liberals were the main enemy. And at that time, it didn't seem that way. At that time, it seemed like Nixon was the main enemy. It seemed like the Republicans were the main enemy. Nixon escalated the Vietnam War. Nixon escalated COINTELPRO. There was this whole anti-war movement led by hippies and counterculture elements. Well, LaRouche comes along and he says, the counterculture, the hippies are bad. The liberals are the main enemy. And, Nixon, because he's trying to build a hard hat movement, he's for more of an industrial economy for the United States. And the people running the left, the liberals, they want to deindustrialize America and they believe in degrowth. And that's the main threat. And he's coming along with these very well thought out ideas that are actually now, after his death, proving themselves to be more accurate in understanding the trends. He understood the trends. He saw in 1960 where the left was going. but it hadn't all played itself out yet. You still had communist groups, you still had the Soviet, but now we're seeing the synthetic left as it currently exists. He saw that the counterculture left in the 1960s would lead to this. And he was saying that. Well, no one else could see that, but he saw it, right? He saw that Russia and China were rising. He saw the USA was going to be deindustrialized. He was tuned in to very long-term trends in politics, in economics, and that was brilliant. It was amazing, right? And there's a reason that he was respected by governments around the world. Indira Gandhi met with him and respected him. The Ba'athist Arab socialist governments around the world respected him. There's a reason for that, because he was deeply tuned in to world events and he saw trends, et cetera, that they didn't see. But that led him to the conclusion that the liberals were the main threat. Well, if the communist groups are all infiltrated by the FBI and CIA and their main job is to prop up the liberals and fight the conservatives, that also is going to get him labeled a fascist. And then we know that it is now a matter of public record that the FBI had infiltrated the Communist Party USA, and they were inciting the Communist Party USA against him. And so his followers were being harassed by the Communist Party USA. And then it's alleged, I've read other places, that his followers were harassing the Communist Party and disrupting their events and protesting them and calling them out, etc. So things got ugly between him and the Communist Party. And the Communist Party back then was known to be rough. I mean, they would scuffle with people when they disagreed with them. And back then there were a lot of communists fighting each other. And so the Communist Party was physically violent to LaRouche people. And so LaRouche, according to what I've read, again, I don't speak for them, this is based on what I have read, he said, okay, the Communist Party is going to be violent. We're going to be violent back, and we're going to surprise the shit out of them. We're going to be really violent back. And you had Operation Mop Up, where he was just like, okay, the Communist Party wants to fuck with me. And he mobilized his members to fight like hell against the Communist Party. And the Communist Party, you talk to people who were in the Communist Party in those years, they are like, they didn't know what the hell had hit them. I mean, it was the LaRouche people, they fought the Communist Party pretty hard. It was not like scuffling with some college kids, not like scuffling with some Trotskyist group. They knew how to fight. And his followers, they said, oh, the Communist Party wants to be violent. We can be violent. And they were violent back to the Communist Party. And it terrified, all these communist groups that are so cliquish and exclusive, and they marginalize smart people and all of that. The Communist Party, fucked with LaRouche, and LaRouche said, oh, we can do the violence thing. I guess we'll do the violence thing. There you go. That sounds great, John. I wasn't aware of that, but that sounds great. And I mean, that's to their credit. So they fought the Communist Party. So then the whole left was kind of mobilizing to defend the Communist Party. And so then there was this idea, well, they're like the new brown shirts. They're fighting the Communist Party. And that's where the notion that they're quote unquote fascists came from. And it really gets down to the fact that the left is tied at the hip to the liberals. The left is an institution of American capitalism, just like German social democracy. I talked about this, how German social democracy became its opposite. It became a mechanism for stabilizing German society and German imperialism. And that's why they couldn't have a revolution at the end of World War I. German society was utterly defeated and destroyed. The workers rose up, and they still couldn't have a revolution because the German Social Democratic Party had just become a wing of the German imperialist apparatus. Well, in America, DSA and the leftist academics and Noam Chomsky and the labor bureaucrats, the AFL-CIA, they are just a wing of American imperialism. They're just part of the American imperialist apparatus. And so if somebody comes along and they're actually against that stuff, they have to marginalize them. They have to fight against them. Look what's been done to me, right? And I'm here. I'm still doing it. But look how much they have come after me. Somebody said the other day, I won't say the name, they said, no one's out to get you, Caleb. Are you fucking kidding me? Have you seen, there are videos with hundreds of thousands of views all about how I'm a Nazi, I'm a white supremacist. No one's out to get me. Serious. Nobody's out to get me. Oh, okay. Right? There's just a huge smear campaign, just a huge all-out effort to tell people that I'm evil, that I'm a Nazi, that I'm a sex cult leader, that I'm scary, I brainwash people. I mean, there is constant attacks. There has been nobody on the internet has faced the level of demonization that I've faced, right? I mean, they have thrown everything they have at me. Okay, so and someone says, oh, no one's out to get you. No, people are out to get me. That doesn't mean I've never done anything wrong. It doesn't mean I haven't made mistakes. I have made mistakes. I have done wrong things. I've owned up to the mistakes I've made. But yeah, they are definitely out to get me. And LaRouche was not part of their club, and they went after him, right? So there you go. There you go. Next question. All right. How can Americans be convinced to control the means of production if they view the state as corrupt and oppressive? Easy. It's not a question of does the government control it or does private entities control it. It's a question you have to frame it as, does it work for you or does it work for the small group of fat cats who own it? Right? If you just frame it as state control, people aren't going to like it. But if you frame it as, we need a government that will make the economy serve us. It's about who it serves. That's the point in question. Because in theory, you can have a highly state-controlled capitalism. Singapore, the government is heavily involved. Saudi Arabia, the government is heavily involved. It's still capitalism. The difference between capitalism and socialism is not state ownership versus private ownership. It is production being carried out according to profit, or is production being carried out to serve public good? That's the question. Right. And yeah, if you frame it as state ownership versus private ownership, people are generally going to say, well, I don't want this corrupt government to control the economy. You have to frame it as the economy being forced to serve the people. And also, it's worth emphasizing, there will be, I think, a big private sector, probably with worker cooperatives, probably with just regular private companies in American socialism, just like you have in China. Right. But China's still socialist, despite having a big market sector. It's still socialist, because the means of production function for the benefit of the people of China, not for the profits of a wealthy few. That's the difference. That's the difference. All right, folks. Well, it's been fun. It's been fun. I enjoyed it. I'll be back tomorrow. Happy Thanksgiving. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. The people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And thank you and good night.